What's up, people? How y'all doing? This might be a little... This might be... a little scuffed. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. But yeah, welcome back, Sauce Rama. Welcome back to Pringo. And Easy Money. Hope y'all are doing well. Okay. I'll make sure that's working. I think it was, yeah. Halfway through the podcast, pretty aight. Well, I appreciate it, Sauce Rama. Yeah, if you guys don't know, me and Rinyold finally got around to making a actual podcast episode. You guys should go check that out after this stream. It's about ICE and deportations and due process and the such. Garrett Jones did a lecture, Immigration and Puerto React. Yeah, I saw that. So, you guys should go check that out. Hopefully the podcast will be able to... I've said this before, but, you know, let's be kind of invite people who I think are reachable, but like, you know, who might have like an economics degree or something, and or like a Substack blogger, and like they don't sort of traditionally do the like weird streaming shit, and it's easier to sort of invite them on like a more formal platform like that. That's, you know, hopefully the goal with that, and it'll continue to get better and stuff, hopefully.
Oh, I'm going to be doing a debate tonight with some Twitch streamer on here. Oh, I forget his name. We're talking about USAID, and I'm sure NGOs, so if economics is a topic that you like to listen about or watch debates about, feel free to stick around. That's what I'm doing tonight.
For this?
So you're going to want to click, I think, either the enjoined button down there or the pair button. And then either request to join or request to co-host. Let's see. Okay, here's a quick invite for co-host. Let me see if I can just...
She won. How old is she? I don't know.
Send
actually.
it to you. Oh my gosh, okay.
A bit of a TikTok professional. Is she louder than me? Quieter than me? I don't know how the audio level is.
It's like not allowing me to pick your profile here.
TikTok fan speedrun.
Okay, so I invited you as a guest, but... Do you want to just do it as a guest?
If that works, sure.
Sure. All right. Hi.
Yeah, what's up? Hold on, I can hear you. My entire screen is black, though. I don't know why that is.
Oh, I don't know. I can see you, though.
I don't know why I can't see you.
Uh-oh.
You can see myself if I try to apply an effect to me.
I'm really bad with technology and connecting your camera to computers and phones to computers. So I was having issues tonight myself.
Oh yeah, no worries. I'm not super used to TikTok, so I don't know I don't know why.
It's changed a lot too since I've done lives consistently. It's a lot more sensory over here.
Oh yeah, yeah, I've had some experience with that before, but
yeah, it's really, you have to like make your own words up for like code words.
you have no clue why on earth my thing is just black.
Well, if you want, I can send you the recording of the live after. If it's black on your end, it's not on mine, but you're in a little box. Let me see if I can make expand. Oh, that makes me small now.
Yeah, hold on. I mean, I can try. There's one thing I can try. I don't know if this will work. We'll see. Nope. Oh shoot. Oh shoot. Now I can't even hear you. Oh no. What do I do? Oh shoot. Okay, give me 1 second. Jesus. Oh my god. I told you it's gonna be scuffed. Oh, I broke everything.
Get back on. I can push it to 8:30, I suppose. Okay.
What's up?
Is that better?
It's, you know, still black, but I will live with it. It doesn't matter that much.
All right.
Yeah.
So did you hear what I said about economics?
Yeah, in the Jubilee debate or in the,
No, I mean, just right now, I said that you're probably going to be more knowledgeable on economics because I just scratched the surface on it when I do debates, but I want to get better at it. So you're probably going to know a lot more about, especially foreign economics, but we'll
sure. Yeah. So I saw you on Jubilee, and what I saw you say there, the things like I took the most issue with there were about the sort of the Doge and USAID stuff, because that's what you went out to talk about. I suppose I kind of want to ask though, like, did you see the fact check on the sort of dollars printed under the different presidents?
Yes, they change their fact checks every now and then. So I watched it when it came out, but then I watched it again, and there was a couple added in there and some changed. So you can let me know, and then we can talk about it. But to my understanding, under the Biden administration, 40% of the dollars circulating were printed under him.
Right. So the one that is not true, just as a matter of the percent of like money that was printed, is not true that 40% of dollars were printed under Biden. Most of the money that was printed under Trump. But secondly, presidents aren't directly responsible for the money supply, that is something that is up to the Federal Reserve. And the president doesn't really have any direct say in it. At least they're not supposed to. Trump is sort of trying to get more of a say in it, which I think is bad. But that is something up to the Federal Reserve. And the reason you see there's different types of money, and we define money differently. So you see a big spike in the M1 money supply, which is like base money. You do see a big spike in that in 2020. But one, that was under Trump, and two, it was only because they changed the definition. If you look at a broader definition of money, which is M2, which includes everything in M1 plus some other stuff, that grew, or like 9% of total dollars were printed of the M2 money supply from January 2021 to January 2025 when Biden was in office.
Okay, so yeah, I'm reading right now between early 2020 and early 2022. So it's in between both administrations, but yeah, the president doesn't actually have say in how much and why it's printed. It's the Federal Reserve. I understand that.
Sure. So I don't think it's fair to blame. I don't think it's fair to blame Biden for those dollars being printed, and I think that's obviously.
I don't blame Biden totally for much, because I think he was more of an asleep at the wheel kind of a president. I blame, when I term presidents, I'm terming the entire administration. So
okay, well, it's not even necessarily his administration either, because again, the Federal Reserve is sort of supposed to operate independently. The president does get to pick, does get to appoint the head, and the Senate will confirm it. But day to day, it operates independently. And the president, it's very unusual for the president to do, for example, what Trump does, where he will literally call Jerome Powell. He will do sort of weird press conferences at the renovation of the Federal Reserve with Jerome Powell and ask him to lower interest rates. That is very, very unusual and tends to be sort of we expect that to have bad and inflationary effects. Typically, Federal Reserve independence, central bank independence is associated with stable and lower inflation.
Okay, can you repeat that last part for me really quick? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so the independence of central banks, the authorities in charge of printing money, them being politically independent, is typically associated with some type of, lower and more stable inflation.
Right, but inflation was the highest under Biden by historically over 40 years. It hasn't been that high since.
Right. So there's two things there. For one, the claim that central bank independence is important and central bank independence is associated with lower inflation is not incompatible with the claim that Biden had the highest inflation in 40 years or whatever. I'm simply saying, if you sort of look at the historical evidence, including you can look at evidence more recently, even from developing countries, it tends to be the case that when central banks are independent, when central bankers are able to operate as technocrats, operate as independent economists, they make decisions in the interest of the long-term economy. And that tends to lead to lower inflation and more contractionary policy than politicians who have more short-term interests and oftentimes may prefer easy monetary policy. With regards to the Biden inflation, I do think Biden had some effect on inflation. I think the American Rescue Plan, the stimulus plan, contributed some amount to inflation, but I also think a decent amount of inflation was supply shocks that the whole world experienced, right? And that the president or even Congress does not have much control over. And some of the money that was printed by the Federal Reserve, which Biden did not have direct control over. And the first two stimulus bills passed under Donald Trump as well. I would say at most, I think you could maybe contribute 30% of the later inflation in 2022 to the American Rescue Plan. But then you have to consider, we also had a really strong labor market under Biden, right? Unemployment was really low. Growth was really high.
Well, why do you think that is? Okay, that's something that I actually addressed with people after the filming of what happened, because Isaiah Martin was even saying that unemployment was at an all-time low under Biden, but he also said in the same argument with somebody that if we were to mass deport all of the illegal immigrants, even the ones who are not committing any crimes, violent or otherwise, and are working and paying towards taxes towards our country, then we would lose people in the construction company, housing markets, and etc. So do you think that the correlation between the unemployment rate under Biden had anything to do with his open border policy?
Well, I wouldn't characterize his policy as open borders, but I do think that
you could just walk right in and out. I did it.
That is absolutely not true. So it was easier.
I lived on the southern border. We continuously came back and forth. I forgot my ID multiple times. I forgot my passport multiple times. And they said, you're fine because you speak English. It was
okay, so that's not. I would not. I would imagine if you're. I mean, you said you forgot your ID, but like if you are a U.S. citizen and you have, you spend some short time in a foreign country, there might be some discretion that border officers have to like let you in or whatever. But you know, I thought the complaint was everyone coming over didn't assimilate and didn't even speak English, right? Most of the people who came over under Biden were not like people let in because the Border Patrol like bought their story or whatever. It was because they claimed asylum and they were screened for the like credible fear standard or whatever, and were allowed to come in the country and wait for their asylum date here.
They were asked questions that never had follow-ups and had voluntary visits afterwards.
But that's still contrary. That's still contrary to your
and did have visas, didn't actually come back to the hearing that they are supposed to come back to renew a visa.
My understanding is like over 90% of immigrants show up for their asylum court date. But
I'm sure that's
that you understand
true.
that still, I think that still kind of like is in conflict with your claim that there was a totally open border. Anyone could just come up and walk over, and if they spoke English, they could just waltz right in. No, these people they went through the asylum process as is on the.
I didn't say that anybody. I'm saying that that's what they told to me. They told that to me after I multiple times forgot my ID and my passport, and they said it's fine. You don't need it. So also, I know somebody as well who had family constantly flying back and forth from, where was it? Indonesia, I think. I think it was Indonesia. And he was able to do that by having somebody in the United States who is a citizen say that they are his family member and that they're coming for a visit for a certain amount of time.
Yeah,
all they had to do was sign a piece of paper. There was no follow-up. There was no check-in. There was nothing. But after the Trump
administration, first of all, if you're undergoing, if you're only going there for a temporary time, if you get like a tourist visa or whatever, obviously you're not going to have a follow-up or check-in or whatever. You're there under a temporary visa, right? You're not even trying to get citizenship or whatever.
That you shouldn't have any follow-up for people you're allowing into your country, even under a temporary visa. The government is responsible for knowing who you are, where you are, and what you're doing in the country?
Not necessarily. There might be cases where I could think that, but like I don't think the U.S. government should be spending a ton of resources following up on every immigrant who comes here through the legal process on a temporary basis. That seems like a total waste of resources.
I think that should have more priority than the resources going to things like USAID, which people are super upset that got cut.
Sure, we can talk about that in a second, and I want to talk about that, of course. But I just want to say, I do think that the immigration does have an effect on the labor market, and immigration was a reason the labor market was so hot during Biden's term. I think companies being able to hire a lot more workers during that time was really good, and it helped native born workers as well, in my opinion.
No, it didn't.
But my point there. Wait, just real quick. So my point. My point about the labor market
as well, because citizens had to get double the amount of work in order to afford to live there because housing costs went up so much. Housing costs.
That's not how unemployment works. First of all, unemployment, if you have a full-time job, you're not counted as unemployed. So my point about the labor market, though, is fundamentally like I do think the American Rescue Plan contributed some to inflation. But I do think there probably was a trade-off there with the really high growth and really tight labor market we saw under COVID. So you should weigh some of the added inflation we got against the 3% unemployment we had for like 27 straight months, which is a really good labor market. We saw a lot of real wage growth for the bottom like 10% of Americans. There was a lot of like wage compression during that period. Some of it has persisted, where you saw wages grow fastest at the bottom 10% of workers as compared to like the top 10% of workers. So I think you should weigh those things.
Significantly, the middle class got the raw end of the deal because it was raised for the lower class because of minimum wage growth, but then there was also raised at the top, but the middle didn't grow much at all.
So I don't believe that's true.
It didn't keep up. It didn't keep up in many states with the cost of living.
During what time period? So if you look at like median household income, I think for 2 years, real median income was pretty stagnant. But we had a pandemic. Like real median household income in almost in every country, it was stagnant or whatever. The U.S. overall, I think, recovered from COVID very well, and I think Biden's plans helped America recover faster than they would have otherwise. It would seem odd to me to say that because we had like maybe 3 percentage points more inflation in 2022 from the American Rescue Plan, we should like therefore say Biden like made all these people poorer and the economy sucked under him, because I think you should weigh it against the other things. I would also, add that like to my knowledge, like when I say wage compression, it doesn't mean like the wages for the middle class or the top 10% actually went down. It just means they didn't go up as much as the bottom, like 10% of people went up. So it's not necessarily the middle class got robbed. It's just that there was more equality because people earning the lowest wages saw the biggest increase.
How is that equality? Because it's an equal outcome, or because of what? Because
you're decreasing the gap between the amount that middle income earners get.
Artificially.
How's that?
Artificially bridging the gap between the lowest income and the middle class income. The middle class stayed stagnant and was already having a hard time in this economy, in the Biden economy. We're having a hard time in this economy as well. I'm not going to lie. I mean, of course, I'm not going to say we're not, but middle class wage growth didn't move with the economy. Lower class did, and they also get more assistance from the government. The upper class did, but they don't get assistance from the government. They get tax breaks. The middle class is the working class, the class that is supposed to be the ones who are benefiting the country the most, who are holding everybody up. They got robbed. They got shit on.
I don't have every figure memorized, but the two numbers that I'm familiar with off the top of my head is like the real hourly wage growth for the bottom 10% of people and like the median household income for everyone, right? So if you look at, real median household income, I believe was roughly stagnant between 2022 and 2023. But again, I think that's largely because we had a pandemic, and it's not clear to me we would have been better off as a whole.
A lot of countries were getting better around 2023, 2024, and even late 2022.
Well, we were getting better overall. Unemployment during that time was really low. Job growth was really high.
You can't really blame the entire Biden economy on the pandemic, that other countries were able to pull themselves out of much faster than we were, and we are one of the wealthiest countries in the world.
That's not true. Like if you compare U.S. GDP growth, real GDP growth to the G7 countries, we have the highest since COVID, right? And that's been pretty consistent. If you compare productivity, it's basically the same story. U.S. productivity growth has been pretty consistent and higher than Europe's as well post-COVID.
Okay.
But I don't want to blame the entire Biden economy on the pandemic or anything. As I've said, I do think that the real that inflation was a few percentage points higher, maybe 3 percentage points higher at its peak from the American Rescue Plan. I just think that there were trade-offs involved that were probably worth it with regards to the labor market and such.
Well, the labor market does the benefit, the economic GDP growth and the benefit of the entire country does not mean that the actual citizens are feeling that growth. We are just upholding the growth for the economic environment of the country. Because it even shows middle class didn't feel the growth. We didn't feel the growth. We didn't feel the stability that people want to claim the Biden administration brought to the economy. We were struggling.
Somewhat agree with that. So if you look at the polling, consumer sentiment and stuff, that did not do well under Biden, to be fair. It's still not doing well now, right? I think since COVID, we've kind of seen people care a lot more about inflation than they used to and care less about things like unemployment and GDP than they used to with regards to measures like consumer sentiment and such. But if you poll like Americans on their individual financials instead of simply asking them about the state of the whole economy, that has not fallen much. That has been doing relatively well. And, you know, I think I care more about sort of the aggregate numbers, and I think we are better off because of many of the things that Biden did. I'm not going to defend all the things he did with the economy, but many of those did better well.
I know that we can pick apart each administration and their failures and what we agree is a failure or a benefit to the economy, for sure. I think that the Biden administration did more harm to the economy than good. And I think what the Trump administration is doing right now is there's going to be pain either way because we are in such a bad deficit and people are struggling really hard. They were struggling more when there was more people in the country that were contributing at a lower wage and competing with the housing market. But it's going to happen.
It's not like you've seen, you haven't really seen like wage growth, like median wage growth, like the rate of it going up, like increase really. Like if you just look at like the Atlanta Fed wage tracker, for instance, I mean, that's still like roughly 4% wage growth, you know, a month or whatever, which is like it's not any better than the last year under Biden. It's a little bit lower than the previous years under Biden because we had a really tight labor market during that time. I also I think most of the things Trump is doing are hurting. Obviously, I think the tariffs are quite bad and they have hurt our economy. And I think they also have contributed to the labor market that we're seeing now because of all the uncertainty and because of the taxes they place on intermediate goods. And with regard to the deficit, I don't know which deficit you're talking about, if you're talking about the trade deficit or budget deficit. But Trump clearly does not care about the budget deficit because he just passed a lot of tax cuts.
And the biggest tax cuts for the working class.
I don't believe so. If you look at
the top class, sprinkled in for the bottom class, but it's the largest tax cuts for the middle class was
not if you measure total change in after-tax income, right? So if you account for the fact that people are also losing like Medicaid benefits and SNAP benefits, and just look at the total change in after-tax income for the bottom 20% of people, they see
requirements for it now.
So there are adding work requirements. That is correct, but the evidence we have historically suggests that most people who don't get the benefits after like work requirements are imposed. For example, we have evidence of this during COVID when we changed the eligibility requirements for Medicaid. 70% of the people who lost coverage after that were not people who didn't meet the new qualifications. They were just people who didn't file the paperwork or weren't notified of it or didn't keep up with the paperwork or whatever, right? There were just these administrative burdens that led to people losing their Medicaid. And, you can tell that like the CBO, right, is projecting like that the Medicaid budget savings from the fact that millions of people are going to not be on Medicaid anymore, right? So they're not going to save money without kicking a lot of fucking people off Medicaid. And, that seems very likely given the historical evidence we have.
Okay, so what you're saying is that because we are implementing requirements to qualify for Medicaid, that it's a bad thing that people are losing their Medicaid because they don't fit the requirements?
No, I'm saying most of the people who lose Medicaid will fit the requirements and simply don't keep up with the added administrative burden. I do also believe that there's
the added administration. Okay, so
I do believe there is a cut to not Medicaid itself. By the way,
if you're an adult and you are taking money from the system that you were living in, if it says that if you have to go and sign a piece of paper every now and then, if you have to mail in a piece of paper every now and then, it is your responsibility to keep up with.
But now we're just doing
whether it's an additive or not.
We're just doing a goalpost shift from actually it's good to make sure that people on Medicaid are working to actually I don't care if people who are working on Medicaid just lose it because they didn't keep up with the paperwork. I think many of the people who will lose it are in pretty sympathetic positions that most people would agree deserve some type of government assistance. And I do also believe, I could look it up, that there is a like $800 billion cut spread over the next 10 years to the committee managing Medicaid, and that's going to require like actual cuts to Medicaid as well. It's not just the work requirements that are being added.
Well, because it's also getting lowered. We're lowering the amount of people that are on Medicaid. I think it's going to be beneficial for the country, for the economy, because we are in a deficit, to cut the fat, trim the fat. And if you are on Medicaid and you don't keep up with your paperwork because you're working, lazy, or otherwise, that is your fault and your responsibility.
So we've gone from it's only going to kick people off who aren't working to, well, if you don't file the paperwork, it's your fault, so I don't care, to actually it's good that we're kicking all those people off Medicaid.
I think say that. Yeah, there. When you are an adult in this country, you have full autonomy, which means you have full accountability for your actions or lack thereof.
Right.
We need to stop infantilizing people who are using the system, who are on welfare, who are on food stamps, who are on Medicaid, whatever. They're not inferior to anybody intellectually or otherwise. They need to keep up with their responsibilities because you are an adult in this country. So
do you concede then that most people who lose coverage will probably be people who still meet the new qualifications? They just don't file the paperwork properly or whatever?
Do I concede that if they don't fill out their paperwork and keep up with their responsibilities,
that of the people who are going to lose Medicaid over the next...
If they're going to lose Medicaid because they can't keep up with their paperwork and their responsibilities, then that's on them.
I'm just asking you, do you concede of the like roughly 7 to 8 million people who are going to be off of Medicaid over the next 10 years, if you think the majority of those people are going to be people who are in fact working?
That's estimated.
Of course it's estimated. It hasn't happened yet. But it's estimated based on historical evidence that we have.
Okay, so if we already know that there's more paperwork and administration things, hoops that you have to jump through in order to keep something that you need to have, prepare for it.
I'm just asking whether or not you think that like will in fact happen. Like maybe you think it's people's fault, like their own fault if they don't.
Happen? I think
I'm asking of the estimated people. You think it could?
Yeah, I think it could, because I think people decide, I'm not going to fill this in, or I'm not going to send it in on time, or what have you. Yeah, I think it could happen. But that
it could mean there's a 10% chance it happens. Could mean there's a 90% chance it happens.
You want me to give you like a professional estimate of what I'm not a professional.
I want you to employ some Bayesian reasoning skills here, okay, and give me a rough estimate of how likely it is that the majority of people...
reasoning skills would be, you're an adult, you have paperwork, your responsibility. If you want...
But that's not the question I'm asking.
If you want this outcome, you have to go through these steps. If you don't go through these steps, you don't get this outcome.
That's not the question I'm asking again. Maybe you think it's okay that they lose it, because they weren't responsible enough. That's fine. But you can see that most of the people who will lose it are, in fact, people who meet the requirements. It's simply they don't keep up with the added administrative burden.
No, I don't think it would be most, but I think it would be some.
Okay, so all the historical evidence like disagrees with you on that one. If you look at, again, the COVID eligibility requirement changes under COVID, if you look at the stuff we have from Mississippi and Arkansas when they added work requirements to Medicaid, it ultimately ends up kicking a lot of people off who are in sympathetic positions, probably deserve some government assistance, and it saves very little money, does not actually increase employment for the state as a whole or anything. Also, I believe I was correct. There is just a like straight out $880 billion of cuts to Medicaid over the next 10 years. So that's, there's that as well. We are straight up just like cutting it.
I mean, it's important to trim the fat when you're in such debt.
Okay, so there's two things with that. One, do you recognize that if you do, like, let's say someone is getting Medicaid, you can conceivably see how like that amount of Medicaid they're getting is like equivalent to some amount of cash, right?
In a way, it depends if they use it.
Sure. So do you understand how when we're calculating, what I'm saying is like after tax income, right? You get a certain amount of transfers from the government. People get Medicaid, they get SNAP. Sometimes they just get like refundable tax credits, like the child tax credit, like they just basically get cash. and they pay a certain amount of taxes to the government. Your after-tax income is just the net of that. If you get $10,000 worth of Medicaid,
these people that are getting these benefits, I have been one of them in my life before. They're paying into the system, but they're actually draining from the system. So what they're giving in does not actually equal the amount that they are taking out.
Yeah, a lot of poor people will get more in government assistance than they pay into the system. That's kind of what being poor is. So the principle I'm trying to get at though is if Trump offers these people tax cuts, if their income tax rate goes down, 2%, and if the standard deduction goes up from $12,000 to $14,000, maybe they save some money from those tax cuts. But if they're also losing their Medicaid benefits, they actually come out on the wrong side of that. They actually are worse off from that because they say,
well, in a way you can be if you're somebody who has dialysis and you're on Medicaid and you need your Medicaid to pay for your dialysis and you only get $1,400 in a stimulus check and a 2% of your taxes, and yeah, you're probably going to lose out on something.
Sure. So the estimate I'm familiar with is, well, I've seen two. One is from Yale, the Yale Budget Lab, and the other is from the CBO. So the CBO estimates that the bottom, they separate it by decile. So the bottom 10% of people and the bottom 10 to 20% of people, they come out on the net negative from the big beautiful bill, in that they lose more money in benefits than they gain from the tax cuts. Do you think that's probably true?
Maybe I'd have to really look into that, but I believe you if you're saying that it comes from the CBO. Sure.
Yeah, there's another one I find, I don't remember the exact numbers, but similar things from the Yale Budget Lab. So, I think I don't even like. I'm a kind of wonky dude with some stuff. I don't even particularly like, for example, corporate income taxes. But the idea that these tax cuts are going to be help the middle class significantly, or that they're helping the middle class and lower classes more than the billionaires or whatever, I just think that is simply untrue. And I think it does show that Trump doesn't really care about the deficit.
I think it helps the middle class more. I think it doesn't necessarily help the whole of the lower class more. I think it just kind of keeps it stagnant where it is, because they're a net drain from society with their lifestyle and their income input and output anyway. And if it helps the billionaires as well, that's equality of treatment, not because we're going to treat you differently depending on how much you make. If anything, the people who get more benefits are the lower class because of how much they make. The middle class will be getting the benefits from the big budget cuts or whatever, the big beautiful bill.
Didn't I just explain to you how you should be looking at the after tax income, which includes the benefit cuts that they're getting as well?
Right, but if the middle class aren't getting the benefits, Medicaid, if they aren't using Medicaid, they are gaining. Right.
So if you look at the CBO estimates, I think the 30th to 40th percentile get plus 0.5% after tax income, and it's the next decile of people get under 1% after tax income as well. These are not meaningful increases, especially because I would, if you consider the fact that borrowing more, getting more debt is going to push up interest rates and probably push up mortgage rates for people as well, it probably comes out net negative or very smallly positive for the middle class.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I would hope you...
We have I'll go till 8:30 tonight. Did you want to talk about USAID?
Yeah, we'll talk about USAID. So I guess you said on Jubilee, essentially, you don't think Doge was necessarily a complete failure because they shut down USAID, and USAID funded a lot of woke stuff or whatever.
Well, not that it just funded a lot of woke stuff. I didn't say that. I said, here's an example of something that we were funding we should not have been funding, like transgender plays and transgender balls.
Sure. So I think there are obviously going to be like examples of stuff that USAID was funding that it probably like should not have been, and especially if you're conservative and you oppose to whatever values.
Well, it should be ideologically neutral. We shouldn't be paying for ideologies we don't agree with in another country.
Well, we were paying for, so most of the stuff that for one, I think a lot of these things are exaggerated. Like a lot of times it'll actually end up being like, oh, USAID money was like funding, it was like giving a grant to like a woman's health hospital, and they were like also treating trans patients, and people like just conflate it with like funding transgender surgeries or whatever. But like, you know, I think the point of funding whatever woke stuff is because we're trying to promote some amount of liberalism and democracy, which is a general value that I would hope most conservatives still agree with in the third world or whatever. But, you know, nonetheless, I think that is that is like a very small amount of USAID spending. Most of it went to...
I don't think it's the majority at all. I don't think it's the majority at all. I don't think it's even 30% at all.
So
I don't agree with that. I think that it's part of it that we shouldn't be paying for. And if we were paying for something like that in another country, we could use that money in
But Doge did not just go after the woke stuff, right? They essentially shut down the entire agency, and it is now officially entirely shut down and transferred to the State Department, and like 83% of its funding has just been entirely cut, and a lot of that went to, you know, really good programs funding. Repeat that, sorry.
80 to 90% of the programs were eliminated, and it was terminated thousands of contracts, and it estimates to save tens of billions of dollars.
So the budget for USAID was about like 0.3% of federal spending. That was what it was in 2024, like you can say tens of billions of dollars, but it's an incredibly but it's an incredibly small part of our budget, and the money does incredibly good things, right? If you look at USAID historically, it has saved like in the upwards of like 20 million lives, and you know, it saves roughly like a few million, 2 million-ish lives a year. And if you look at the estimates of people who are probably dead already from the USAID cuts, I mean, there are two estimates I have. You know, one is 261,000 adults and 544,000 children. The other one is 500K to 1 million lives. So this is something that's already cost potentially a million lives.
That's a really important picture, because even if his numbers are off, I'm just going to grant it. That's a really important picture. Why are we paying 30% of all OECD, of all foreign aid combined in the UN and NATO? Why are we the ones paying so much compared to the other countries? They're not even paying what they're pledging, which is supposed to be 0.7. They're paying way under what we pay, and we paid under what we said we would pay, which is 0.7. We paid 0.24%.
I think you might be talking about a different type of foreign aid. You're saying we spend 30% of all foreign aid from the OECD?
We pay for 30% of all the OECD foreign aid. In regards
but that's not like humanitarian aid. That's military
the money,
aid,
I guess,
right?
You could say, from the other countries. So if we pull in all the other countries, we're paying 30% of that.
You're almost certainly referring to military aid, or at least including military aid when you said that. So I do think the U.S.
foreign aid through USAID was paying for 30% of all the aid that all the other countries send out for foreign aid as well. Like all westernized countries, developed countries.
Oh, so that might... So I don't know for sure if that's true. That still sounds a little high to me. But that's because we are a really big country, right? Like we have a much higher GDP than most of these other countries. We spend about 0.2% of our, or I think 0.8% of our GDP on foreign aid. A lot of other countries spend more than that. They spend closer to 1 to 2% of their GDP.
0.8 is 0.7.
My bad. 0.7% of GDP on foreign aid.
Well, you said 0.08, so that's a big jump if we're actually gonna, look at the numbers. But
so less than 1%, yeah.
Less than 1%. Yeah, irregardless of our GDP growth, the people of the country are not feeling the growth that the GDP is representing.
Well, I'm just using that to explain.
So if your people are
obviously,
suffering,
if you are a much richer country, you're going to donate.
Good, even if on your paper it looks good, and the people of your country are suffering, then you need to cut in places that you are helping other countries. And you can say, you know what?
So the reason I'm citing
and all you private businesses, you guys can go ahead and do that. You guys have the money. If you want to be charitable to these other countries and these other ideological NGOs that are going on in other countries, you put your money towards that. We are going to save our money because we are in so much debt. We need to do something drastic, or our kids are not going to even see Social Security.
So the reason I'm citing the number like as a percent of GDP is I'm saying obviously just as a number in terms of billions of dollars or whatever, the US might contribute 30% of foreign aid or whatever, but that's because we're a very rich country. Just the same way you would expect, like, if a billionaire donates $1 million.
Other areas, just because we have that total amount of money doesn't mean we have that total amount of money to just spend however we want. It's already allocated.
Well, it was already congressionally allocated to USAID. I'm simply stating,
right, but
your obligation is going to differ based on how rich you are. Like,
and other countries are recognizing that we are in so much debt. Our dollar is losing so much value. Yes, a lot of it is Trump's doing, especially during this term, the value of the dollar going down. But what I'm saying is other countries are recognizing that our economy is failing the way that it is going now. So when you need to trim somewhere, you trim where you're just giving out money to other countries because you need to.
The giving out money to other countries stuff
to do.
So that's obviously, I think the general position is it is good to save millions of lives at very low cost. USAID,
that's subjective. That's subjective. It could be very low cost.
It can be it can be. I don't know what you mean by it's subjective. I'm expressing to you my opinion, and maybe you think
to save millions of lives with money that you have in front of you, but it's also good to feed your family at home.
Sure, but you should right? Like, so you can weigh those things. So money, that's true, but money obviously goes a lot further in the third world to literally save millions of lives, but it could not do the same when it could not do the same in the US. I would just ask, would you spend 0.7% of GDP to prevent the Holocaust, supposing it would not have any direct benefit to the US?
Without it having direct benefit to the US?
Yeah, like if we were fighting World War II and like liberating all the camps.
The only reason that the United States got involved in World War II is because of Pearl Harbor. We were staying out of it up until that point.
So I'm asking you if you think if suppose as a hypothetical, it cost 0.7% of GDP to prevent all the big H. I don't know what you can say on TikTok.
I think,
and suppose it didn't have any direct benefit to the U.S.'s war effort. Do you think it would have been a good thing to do?
Thank you. I was gonna say okay, so that doesn't even make any sense. If it were to stop the Holocaust, if we put 0.7% of our GDP that we were not even going to use anyway, and it didn't affect us, benefit or not.
What do you mean? I'm not saying that spending the money is not going to affect us in any way.
Okay, so would you do it if you knew that a percentage of the money that you were sending over there was actually going to fund private businesses that the Nazis were running?
To prevent the big H? Yeah.
You would send over money to fund the Nazis.
If it saved 6 million lives.
Right, but it wouldn't. That's not what it's doing.
That's the point of the hypothetical is it is saving 6 million lives.
Let's take a pause, okay? NGOs exist because there is underdeveloped countries.
I just want to answer my hypothetical.
In these other countries, we're sending aid to NGOs into other countries, and it's not developing the countries, it's replacing the government in the countries.
Most of the money that like USAID sent to NGOs was just like grants given to like humanitarian organizations that just like ran hospitals and administered medicine.
Which is part of the 0.7%.
Yeah.
Right.
And if
and the NGOs are not developing the country. They're actually creating.
So number one, I believe there is.
This has been talked about by, if I'm not mistaken, Goldman Sachs' previous CEO.
So I'm just saying, for one, I do believe there is evidence that like USAID and foreign money does in fact like lead to more economic growth in the places where it is spent, and it does, you know, because it saves lives, it lets people, you know, work longer and the such.
No, it actually doesn't create.
I'm just saying, you can suppose
it creates short-term medial intervention. It doesn't create economic development in the country, in the host country. It creates paperwork economic development for the NGO economy, but not for the host economy.
So I don't believe that is true. I can look through my notes because I believe there is
look it up because it was even talked about here. I'll tell you right now.
Wait, but we can. I could concede that point. Now, I believe in my notes on USAID, I have a paper that it suggests that it does lead to more growth in the areas where the money is being spent for the host country. But regardless, my point, I want to answer to my hypothetical about suppose.
I'm not gonna do this weird hypothetical that sending money over to other countries is going to prevent a Holocaust. I'm not going to do that because it's not accurate.
Well, no, I'm at, first of all, you should be able to answer the hypothetical anyway, but second of all, I'm asking, let's, you know, suppose we had to spend 0.7% of GDP to do air raids over, Nazi Germany, and that would have stopped the Holocaust. Do you think it would have been a good thing to do?
Doing like this false equivalency thing, it doesn't make any sense.
I don't think it's a false equivalency, but I'm asking. I think your answer to that would prove. I think your answer to that would prove a principle.
If I had a magical wand and I had this money that it wouldn't affect me otherwise, would I send it over to stop a horrible regime? Yeah.
So I think what that shows, the principle that shows, is that you do think
it's not going to do anything.
Is that you do think that foreigners' lives have some moral value, that we have some obligation.
I think all human life has moral value. Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah. So I think, but you understand the principle you're accepting there. I think it's good to spend a small amount of money relative to your GDP to save lots of lives. And I don't see why that wouldn't apply.
Not when it's preventing the actual development of the host country to continue to self-sustain.
How does PEPFAR prevent the host country from self-sustaining?
I don't know private NGO names in foreign countries, but I can
PEPFAR is just the name of the program that administers HIV medication to mothers and infants so they don't catch HIV when they're giving birth.
Well, it's actually a very low chance that mothers even pass that on to their infants when they're pregnant, but okay.
Still saves millions of lives.
Okay. Are other people also participating?
In what sense?
Are other countries that have the same type of development as we do, are they participating to the same level that we are? Because they're not, and they weren't.
That seems irrelevant.
It's irrelevant? I don't think so, because otherwise it's a waste of money.
Why is it a waste of money to spend a very small amount of money to save millions of lives?
In the country, it's going to fund these NGOs for a tiny percentage of people who get access to these NGOs, and even them, they have criteria, and a lot of it is ideological, political criteria to qualify for these programs in other countries.
So I don't think. First of all, I don't think it's only good to save lives if it causes.
They're creating a dependency, and it is not the sole priority that America has dependent countries like in Africa or the Middle East, because it's preventing long-term governance of the host country. It's not creating an economic development of the entire country. It's creating a small percentage of economic development within the NGO field.
So I don't first of all, what's the evidence that it's not like it's creating these dependencies in the first place or whatever? I don't believe there's strong evidence for that. But I also don't think it's only good to save lives if it leads to like some sustained economic growth in a country. I think it's good to save lives because people's lives are typically good and they typically have positive experiences, and we should try to promote that as much as possible.
Okay. Well, what you're trying to do is make a moral argument that we should be doing this way and this way only.
Correct.
I don't agree with that moral argument. I think that if people want to donate, and if people work to donate, then they can do that. But I don't think
why wouldn't you apply the same logic to the Holocaust? Why wouldn't you say, well, people want to donate to the Air Force to do air raids and stop the Holocaust?
It's totally different. That's a war.
Okay.
We do that with war. We send foreign aid with war, not through USAID, but with
why is it good to send foreign aid with war though? What is the reason it is good in my hypothetical to stop the Holocaust from happening?
You're like morally exhausting, I think.
Okay. I mean, I think the reason why it's good is because you're spending a relatively low amount of money to save a lot of lives from a lot of suffering.
That relatively low amount of money, if you kept it for your country, you would be able to crawl out of debt slowly.
Number one, absolutely not. Again, it's 0.3% of our federal spending. It's not going to make a big impact on how much debt we have.
Well,
and number two, it does really good stuff.
Rescinded almost $8 billion. There was thousands of contracts that were eliminated through USAID, which is estimated to have saved tens of billions of dollars. We're also making money with tariffs. I know we don't really have time to talk about tariffs right now, but we are, as a country, making money with tariffs, which is going to, in the long run, benefit the economy of our country, even if it temporarily means that we are going to pay more for apples.
Well, I have a ton of disagreements with that.
I know you do. I don't think the moral high ground argument that we should be paying this because it's the morally right thing to do, which is how you get trapped into always paying for it, even though the money that you're sending over is going to NGOs. It's funding people like ISIS. It's funding people like Hamas. Hell, I mean, it is.
With funding ISIS, I don't think it would be a good thing to do. Or well, like if the majority funding went to ISIS or whatever.
Doing it, and we should be having private companies if they want to do it. Which some programs that were eliminated were picked up by private companies.
Yeah, I know. And like I think people should donate more individually, right? Like I donate 10% of my income to charity, to like just to clear here. But like, you know, I also think
if they have the means to do that, they should do that. But you're forcing this moral charitable act onto society.
Well, I think the United States should spend money on good things. I think when it's moral to spend money on something, you should do it.
Okay, you should do it. That doesn't mean you ought to or you are going to, period, the end.
I think you ought to spend money. I think the U.S. government ought to spend some amount of money on foreign aid.
You should do it. It's such a lame argument. Are you kidding
me?
You
ought to do it. Do you care about the ought?
Regardless of how you morally think about it, you are forcing a society to pay for charity.
Every government program is like that. Do you think you can't argue for like any government like funding of anything? Like I don't know what you support the government doing exactly, but like, you know, the government is forcing me to pay a tariff regardless of my thoughts in it, right? The government is forcing
mileage tax. I don't support income tax. I don't support housing taxes, property taxes. I don't support clean energy bill taxes. I don't support any of that. No.
Okay, what do you support? Any government spending? Is there any welfare program? Is there like any welfare program you support?
What?
Is there like any welfare program you support?
Yeah, I think that it's important to pay for food stamps.
So how's that not the same thing as like the USAID thing? You're forcing me, regardless of my opinion, to pay for this welfare.
It's in our home. It's like if we had a neighborhood of people and I knew my neighbor was hungry and I had food, I'm going to help my neighbor. But if somebody in the other all the way across the country who I don't know says, hey, I'm hungry too, can you also give me money? And then everybody says, oh, me too over here, I'm hungry too. Oh, I was about to go get a job, but now I'm not going to. I was about to develop my own government, but now I'm not going to because you're paying for my life. That's how these systems work. And
so
also,
I don't think there's any evidence of the second half of that. But
to pay for a charity that they may or may not agree with is the same thing that Islamic caliphates force people to do.
That's the same thing as food stamps. A lot of people don't agree with food stamps, but we force people to pay for it too because we think it's good. Because generally people have the intuition that it is good for the government to spend money to ensure some adequate food supply to people. In the same sense, I think generally it's good, and most American people do actually support foreign aid.
I know you think I'm demonic. I know you think I'm demonic because I think America first is important. That's
but you don't have to be.
Fine. But I think it's
America
important
first.
to take care of the family in your home before you say I'm going to feed other families and not prioritize the people in my house.
But you recognize that, for one, the aid that we give to other countries goes a lot further in terms of just like improving people's lives more than the same dollar in the US, right? Like if I give, in the same sense, if I give $1,000 to a homeless person, that means a lot more than giving $1,000 to Jeff Bezos.
For sure.
If the US money,
and then guess what happens when you give the money to a homeless person who has made decisions that ended up there? It doesn't go to them and their better future. It doesn't.
But there's a lot of evidence that USAID and the programs it funds save a lot of lives.
I'm sure it saves a lot of lives, but in the long run, it doesn't create government, it creates dependency.
What's the evidence for that?
Hindering a host country from developing themselves by interfering.
What's the evidence for that?
You can look it up. A lot of people talk about it, including people from the World Economic Forum, Goldman Sachs, and other banks. Go ahead and look it up. I can look through.
I mean, I could look through my note again. My understanding is that there are studies, for example, that say like when a hospital is, placed in a certain place in rural Africa, that city and that county and the surrounding area, they do experience stronger growth as a result of that. Because plausibly you could see how having people not have disease burden, not have a ton of diseases so they can work more and like live longer, like how that would probably lead to more stability and increased growth. You agree that mechanism is plausible?
Plausible, sure. Can you also then concede to the idea that if you're sending money over to this rural area that has been in this state, that sure, we can use rural Africa, that the money is going to actually benefit the entirety of society and not just a small portion of it, where most of it is actually going to be laundered and used for violence?
So I don't think there's any evidence that the majority of it is laundered for violence or whatever. I would hope that Doe's agency that was supposed to find all this would be the one that came out with all the evidence for that, but they didn't do that. They just cut basically the entire department.
Good, because the entire department was funding things that shouldn't be funded in the first place.
What's the evidence for that?
I just told you how NGOs work in foreign countries.
What's the evidence that the majority of money was going to NGOs for some improper purpose?
I didn't say that the majority of money was going to NGOs for an improper purpose. I said that money going to NGOs are not actually giving a net benefit for the host country, but only giving a minor benefit for the NGO economy, not for the host country. You want to hinder the development of an underdeveloped country by sending your aid in, which oftentimes is ran by people who are related to the people who are sending the money, and they get to decide where it goes, what it's used for, the ideological purposes of it, or not. It also funds things, again, like I said, terror groups in Syria, Iraq, Gaza, Africa. So, you're sending money to fund these groups, but then you're also saying, but it also helps this small portion. Sure, it can help.
No, I think, first of all, I don't...
the actual situation.
Number one, I don't think there's any solid evidence to suggest that a significant portion of the money went to...
Did I
terror organizations or
portion funds terror organizations. You are a liberal, aren't you?
You didn't say to be fair, you didn't say a majority. You didn't say a majority of the money funds terror organizations. I recognize that. You are implying, I think, much more of it went to terror organizations than there was any reasonable basis for believing. Again, I would hope that DOJ, the agency that was supposed to find all this stuff, would have actually found anything. But where's DOJ's reports?
Taking it, but if you actually listen to what I'm saying and look it up yourself, look up. You can ask chat.
Why didn't DOJ find anything? Why didn't DOJ, the agency that was supposed to find all this stuff, find any evidence of it going to like a fucking ton of terrorist organizations or whatever?
They found a ton of fraudulent evidence. They were focusing a majority on the fraud that was happening inside the country, but they were also getting sued left and right, and they were having terror attacks on the person who was running the entire operation in the first place.
Oh, big balls? Yeah, dang.
Yeah.
So unfortunate
there were terror attacks within the country.
Yeah, look, I mean, like, I'm asking for evidence that DOJ found with regards to the agency that they cut spending for, which I think did very good things, even if they had just an uncertain amount of evidence, right? I don't think you should cut essentially the entire program or the entire department that is saving, again, millions of lives without having some reasonable degree of certainty that most of the money is being used for improper purposes or whatever. And hopefully we'd only cut the money that's actually going to improper purposes.
Say most of the money is going to improper purposes.
How much is
You keep repeating it, and somehow it's gonna make it true, and that's something that came out of my mouth.
Number one, you said that all. Number one, at one point,
it's a major portion, but it is a portion. And if we are giving a portion to terror groups that are killing a small portion of people, or benefiting a small portion of people, it
benefited millions of people. But number one, you did say that you thought all of the money was stuff that money shouldn't be spent on.
It was most of the money. Now it's all the money.
You literally said at one point, all the money is going to stuff that shouldn't be spent on anyways. You said that at one point. Number two, I think any reasonable person. Okay, I think any reasonable person, you definitely did, but I think any reasonable person, when you say stuff like this USAID money went to a bunch of NGOs and it doesn't actually help the host country and it does all this evil, horrible stuff or whatever, the implication that they get, the implication that the implication.
You are trying to make this. Okay, I'm very happy for you and your moral superiority thing that you have going on. But no, I don't think that NGOs are inherently evil or doing just evil, horrible things. But I do think that it is hindering the host country from developing its own country.
You clearly painted NGOs in a very negative light. I'm not suggesting that you think
I don't think I clearly paint this picture and you're going to interpret it like the liberal arts student that you are. That's totally
I don't think you've said a single positive NGOs about this thing the whole time. You've only used NGOs as like a negative thing. That doesn't mean that I'm not suggesting that you think all NGOs are bad or anything. But again, I think any person watching you speak, listening to you speak, would not think, oh, this girl thinks that 1% of money goes to NGOs. They would think, oh, this girl's saying that a significant portion, that 30% plus of the money goes to NGOs for improper purposes. Also, I will not be gaslit. You 100% said all the money is going to something that shouldn't be spent on anyways.
Well, clearly 90%, almost 90%, 83 to 85% of the programs were eliminated because it was money that shouldn't be spent outside of the country.
No, but should it be spent by? It was cut because DOJ was like ideologically opposed to it, not because DOJ is some. Again, it's funny that you think all this money is being spent in these weird ways. DOJ didn't come out with any evidence of that. They just cut 83% of the programs without solid evidence of any of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm very happy for your moral superiority. I don't agree.
I'm not like claiming to be like morally superior or anything.
But let's just be honest. What you're doing is you're trying to paint me in this picture that I think that you're putting me in absolute statements, and I didn't make absolute statements. I don't think that NGOs are all inherently evil, but I don't think that they're a net bet. Are you done?
Yep, I'm done.
Okay, I don't think that they're a net benefit to the country that they're going in and helping. They might be helping their NGO economy, but they're not helping the actual economy of the country and the government that they're going in to help. And you can look at people who have said things the same thing that what I'm saying, like it's right here. Oh my gosh.
There was some very rigorous evidence.
Okay, what's his name? William Easterly from the World Bank, Dambisa Mayo from the Goldman Sachs and World Bank, and Angus Deaton from Noble.
To be clear, are these people saying that humanitarian aid that of the type USAID was doing did not cause long-run economic growth, or are they saying that NGOs were embezzling the money, or what are these people claiming exactly?
Argues that aid correlates with slower growth and higher corruption, especially when delivered long-term via NGOs. Yeah.
Okay, so number one, I don't know exactly what we're citing there, but there's obviously going to be a correlation between how rich a country is and how fast it grows to how much foreign aid it gets. What would matter would be the causal mechanism, whether the counterfactual is higher or lower, because we would expect the poor countries are the ones that are going to be getting the most aid. The question is whether or not the aid that they're getting is raising or lowering their growth.
Okay.
And like I can read you. I found the paper that I have in my notes, the meta-analysis that I just have saved in my notes. That said, they actually try to assess the causality of it. They disaggregate samples into different time horizons and assess if there are temporal shifts in aid effectiveness. The new and updated results show that earlier reported positive evidence that AID's impact is robust to the inclusion of more recent studies, and this holds for different time horizons as well. Like,
okay.
Well, okay.
I really appreciate the debate. I don't think we agree at all on the way foreign aid is distributed or how it should be used, but I appreciate the practice for debating economy topics, especially foreign economy topics, but thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate talking. I'm sure we can
have a great night.
Something up again one time. If you ever want to talk about tariffs or anything, we can talk about that too.
We can talk about that maybe another time.
All right. Well,
okay. Good night.
Good night. I appreciate it. Yep.
Yeah.
My God. I hate TikTok. Oh shit. My OBS is fucked up now. Oh, fuck. Jesus. Fawn too nice to woman, Drew. She doesn't know that's a problem? Real. You absolutely cook that woman? I appreciate it, Gavin. My TikTok setup is so scuffed. I gotta come up with some better solutions so I can do it more often. Not a cast iron skillet. This is true. This is real. You should debate knowledgeable people like King of the Coast. I mean, I've been King of the Coast on stream before. The issue, well, part of the issue with people like with King of the Coast, like we would like have marginal disagreements on stuff, but I think for the most part we'd agree, and on the stuff where we disagree, I think he would just be more knowledgeable than me. Why didn't you turn her ideas on her? What do you mean exactly? I did, dude. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going crazy. Number one, she for sure said all of the money. I'm not crazy. There was one time where she did literally say all the money was going to stuff that shouldn't be spent on. It shouldn't be spent on anyways. And secondly, I think like 2 times I noticed it looked like she was getting arguments from her like TikTok chat. Like there's one guy in TikTok chat that looks like she was like taking arguments from or whatever. Spending money limits development, but wants U.S. money spent on us. Oh, true. Well, see, that's not done with the neo-colonial intention. I mean, you never go that far, thankfully. Okay, don't worry. We have a lot of other fun stuff to do today, but first. 153 billion cars and electric batteries and packaged medication. South Korea, maybe? Man, I don't know who the fuck makes batteries like that. I thought it would be like South Korea or Japan. Like 8,000 kilometers? Triddle the best part of stream for real, for real. At least Dylan appreciates it. Oh, also thanks for the gifted membership, Supreme. I appreciate it. Had him on stream? No, I have not had him on stream. I've invited him on stream before. EU country? I think it probably is, but I think it's got to be Eastern Europe. I think it's too far to be, or too close to be Western Europe. I'm gonna guess Poland. I don't think that's right though. Yeah, fuck. Wait. Is it Hungary that's below Poland? Hungary, yeah. Let's fucking go. Czechia? Inaccurate. That's below. Well, that's between Germany and Poland, kind of below them. Also, my TikTok stuff is the same as the IRL stuff, which I need not tomorrow, but on the 13th, because me and North will be at the Unfuck America tour to IRL stream it. I don't believe Isaac is going, so it'll be me and North. I gotta put this away. That shit looks good on you. I appreciate it, Chiprinko. It is a new shirt. I got it like 2 or 3 days ago. Iron Stovetops, China, obviously, number 1. Germany. Okay, number 5. I feel like we would be up there. Okay, we're number 8. Japan? South Korea? I really don't know. Yeah, damn. Okay, whatever. Germany, Mexico. Oh, I probably could have guessed Mexico. I could have guessed Italy too. Damn. Whatever. Okay. One quick meme and then we'll talk about Jon Stewart, I guess. We have Bernie being epic Luddite here. Let's go.
But here's what I think, Chris, and it's the reason why I'm going to introduce legislation for a moratorium on data centers. And data centers are the infrastructure of AI. I think we have not a clue. We are totally unprepared for what is coming. And what is coming, I think, as you've just indicated, it is not just robots. Bezos at Amazon talking about replacing 400,000 workers and other companies doing similar things. It is impacting entry-level jobs for college graduates. There is no profession out there that it's not going to be hit. So I think you're going to see massive job loss. And I think also what you are seeing now is literally a cognitive decline among young people.
Literally.
In this country, their attention spans are worse. significantly worse.
This is the only part that's half true, okay? I mean, it's true that AI could cause job losses. I just think that it'll probably still be a net benefit, especially if we can find a way to manage it appropriately. But like in the sense of AI, we need an AI dividend, okay? But why would Bernie ever get on board with that? We need to ban data centers.
I worry very much what used to be science fiction, that the computers will take over. There is now a legitimate fear that artificial general intelligence will not only become smarter than human beings, they'll be able to communicate with each other independent of humanity and the implications of that. Bottom line is, I'm not a Luddite, and we have got to make sure, though, and robotics work for working people, not just to make these billionaires even richer. A handful of billionaires, you know, it's Musk and Bezos and Zuckerberg and Altman and Ellison and some others. The richest people in the world are pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into AI and robotics. Do you think they're worried about the implications of that for working people, the middle class? I don't think so. I think we got to take a deep breath. We got to slow this thing down. We got to work on international treaties with China and other countries. But I think people.
It's like, I can't imagine. Dude, I have no clue how we would ever get an AI treaty. Like, I don't want to. Maybe it's not impossible, but at least for nuclear weapons, it's like easier. It's like easy to monitor, relatively easier than AI shit. Like, I have no clue how you could tell. Like, we're gonna do like what fucking data center inspections in China? I don't think there's any way you can tell from the outside what a data center is even used for. And then I have no clue, even if they somehow set up some monitoring system of what the AI center is actually doing, I have no clue how that would ever be enforced. Kill me. Also, Bernie, this is like the oldest I've ever seen Bernie look, which makes sense because he's old. But
people have not a clue about what is coming down the pike with terms of AI.
Like, I have no, like, obviously, AI is good enough to replace all these jobs or whatever. I'd hope it'd be good enough to contribute significantly to like research and development, and that probably does have like crazy positive spillovers. Okay, do I want to do that? Can't believe we're doing this shit, I guess. What's up, Trotsky? The point John Stewart was making was basically correct, by the way. In which one? In this one of Oren Cass, where he said economists are in the room making these decisions as well. That point might, I mean, I don't agree with that point, but you know, that point could be correct, but it's not even responsive to like what he was criticized for. Like, what he was criticized for was not understanding that economists support a carbon tax as the optimal policy. Oh god, I can see the future now. Dems will fight AI like they fought immigration for decades. Then a new Trump will come along and be the anti-clinker party. I kind of doubt that. Also, how much did Democrats fight? I mean, obviously, prior to the 70s or whatever, I imagine they'd be fighting against immigration. But like, I don't know how, like, was Clinton that anti-immigration? I know Clinton did deportations and stuff as well. But the General Monty and Bailey point is correct, but he's dumb. Yeah, he is indeed. I don't know if we're gonna watch all this. Easy Money wanted me to watch all of it, but I don't know if there's any point in watching all of this.
Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to reintroduce himself. His name is Oren Cass. Oren Cass. Oren, it's so nice to see you again. You are the chief economist.
Point on AI data center stuff because it blows the fuck out small business owners, but also it's annoying online. True. But I hate small business owners. They're all lame and inefficient. What if I want my cool, more epic data centers to have my AI goon Razer Alexa thing?
Encompass, and that is a self-imposed title, or that's
imposed is good. Yes, self-imposed.
I know unions were not super pro-immigration. Based on, I mean, I don't have exact metrics or anything, but I would guess big capital enjoyers. That's literally me for real.
economist at American Compass think tank, contributing opinion writer for the Financial Times and the New York Times, which is why I wanted to talk to you. You recently wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, and it is an op-ed I've been waiting for, young man, for many, many years, to come from someone who is more, or is classified as more, on the right. So to get into it, I want you to briefly explain. It was about the idea that the financialization of our economy is a net negative. But
I think it's, by the way, I don't know for sure. I'm pretty sure in any other reality where Jon Stewart didn't make the same, if you guys don't know the context, I'm assuming most of my viewers know the context. Jon Stewart was talking to like a famous like behavioral economist, and he kind of was strawmanning economics and was not very good at listening to the economists' their explanation of why economists, you know, for example, support a carbon tax and are in fact interested in public welfare and not simply, you know, maximizing shareholder profits. And he brought on Oren Cass, who is a, it wasn't Thaler, was it? It wasn't it? Yeah, it was. Yeah. And Oren Cass is not really an economist. He gave himself the title of chief economist at the institute, whatever he founded. He doesn't even he does not have a degree even. Isn't Jon Stewart pro-Israel? I doubt it. I don't believe so. He might have been in the past, but I don't believe he is anymore. I feel like he isn't, but I don't know for sure off the top of my head. Oren Cass, who is a, I think if Jon Stewart hadn't received that criticism, I'm chief economist at the Non-Fund Institute. This is true. I'm chief economist. You're a junior economist, okay? Jon Stewart would have, if he didn't get this criticism, correctly characterized Oren Cass as sort of a right-wing, I'm a non-fun groiper, oh no, like right-wing hack, because Oren Cass, in order to do things like defend Trump's tariffs, kind of has to argue against the entire field of economics by saying they're all too elitist and they're all too condescending, and actually economics isn't a science at all, and the laws of economics are nothing like the laws of physics. Therefore, you know, we shouldn't take some of these things very seriously. But because Jon Stewart now needs an ally in his anti-economics little arc he's going on, we got Oren Cass here. Are going to join the Gooners for good young man. What the hell?
I want you to give just sort of a brief description of this op-ed and sort of what motivated you to write.
I watched the first 9 minutes of this, by the way. But, you know.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on to talk about it. These are always a lot of fun.
Always.
You know, financialization, I guess we probably have to define it as a starting point. It is essentially, and there are all sorts of technical definitions, but essentially it refers to the increasing role of financial markets in the economy, where they sort of become ends unto themselves, and people start transacting and rejiggering and configuring businesses and taking cash out, not with any effort to create anything valuable in the real world, simply to...
Wait, you have to watch the Thaler one first? I've seen the relevant part of the Thaler one, and I've described the context for the viewers who haven't.
More cash out of the activity.
Give some examples of what financialization specifically, what that might be.
Sure. So you see it in a lot of the kind of Wall Street firms. If you think about hedge funds, private equity funds, right? A lot of the time what they're doing is they're collecting a whole lot of money, and, you know, interesting question where that money comes from. And then they're going out and looking for things that they think they can buy at one price and sell at a higher price. So if you're a hedge fund, right, in the case of what's called a high frequency trading hedge fund, you don't even care what you're buying and selling. You're literally building bigger fiber optic cables to try to race your trades to the floor faster so that you can get out in front of whoever else is bidding on them. You make a teeny little bit on millions of transactions, and ta-da, you've generated a profit. You haven't actually done anything useful. You've just extracted value from somewhere else. If, you know, you're
to me, it sounds like he's just describing arbitrage, and essentially everyone, like every economist will agree, arbitrage is not efficient. It's not really good, and you know, it's not. Ideally, you should try to minimize it. I don't think financialization, though, is just defined as the increase in arbitrage. And there are other parts of financialization that are probably good, like the fact that high frequency traders like do provide a lot of liquidity for people. That seems plausibly pretty good.
Private equity firm, in a lot of cases, what you're trying
and there is evidence that private equity firms do sometimes manage even things like hospitals more efficiently. That's good as well.
You do is say, let's go.
Oh, you're definitely right about Jon Stewart. Is it definitely not pro-Israel anymore? Yeah, I feel like by good, do you mean efficient? So efficient in the sense of the socially optimal outcome, like closer to it. That is what I mean by efficient in that context.
Go out and find a series of smaller businesses. Maybe they're privately run. Maybe the people running them aren't even just maximizing profit. Maybe they're veterinarian clinics, let's say, or nursing homes.
Right.
And can you buy up a bunch of them, combine them together, maybe squeeze the customers a little harder, squeeze the workers a little harder, get more cash out of it. Now you have a profit. Maybe now can you sell it to someone else? Can you, when you talk about financial engineering, can you do what's called a capital restructuring? So add a lot more.
Arbitrage is good as that it standardizes prices organically. That's not, so my understanding of arbitrage is when you know, for example, the prices are differing by region or whatever sooner than other people know. Like in this context, it's like, because your hedge fund has literally faster, their company, like he's right about companies literally building faster wires to like get stock information sooner and therefore be able to buy it cheaper and sell it at the price that they know before everyone else it's like actually trading for. That's not that's not organically standardizing prices, because that's the price, you're just getting the information sooner. The other people would get the information in a few milliseconds later anyways. Arbitrage is the mechanism by which prices find equilibrium. I don't think that's not the commonly understood. That's not what arbitrage is commonly understood to mean.
Or debt to it, so that you can earn more money. Now you've also added more risk.
Like in the example Oren has mentioned, which is a real example. I disagree on everything else. But it's a real example. It's not prices. It's not the mechanism by which like prices find equilibrium. It's like you just get information on the equilibrium price sooner, essentially. As far as I know, it's just taking advantage of price differences. Doesn't need to be because the info is symmetry. Sure, I think that's in the context of what Oren is talking about. It's not. It would because of information asymmetries, but I don't think, maybe I'm wrong here. You know more than me, Charsky, but I don't think arbitrage is commonly understood to be either one, efficient, or two, the way in which prices standardize. Practice is taking advantage of difference in prices or two or more markets, striking a combination and matching deals to capitalize on the difference, the profit being the difference between market prices at which the unit is traded. Arbitrage has the effect of causing prices of the same or very similar assets to different markets to converge. No, yeah, it's not how I've heard it used. Yeah. Last sentence. Yeah, but it's because you're has the effect of causing prices of the same or very similar assets in markets to converge. It's because you're selling it at the equilibrium price. Yo, hotel. Why are you? But why? I have a hotel. You can stay there. It's free. I'm ready for South Carolina. I have a hotel. There's a sofa bed in the hotel. You don't need a separate hotel.
If something goes wrong, turns out firms bought by private equity funds are 5 to 10 more times likely to go bankrupt.
Right.
Well, if you're a private equity fund, okay, well, if I buy 100...
I don't know the source for that is, by the way. Maybe it's potentially true, but I would somewhat doubt it.
With a bunch of them going bankrupt, I can generate more profit.
SMH, I think I can. I mean, you should be able to cancel if you just made it.
On balance, from taking more risk, even though, of course, all the workers...
Not that doing a flag in the background, yeah, you debated an abortion? Yeah, Gavin.
At the firms that went bankrupt only had the one job. And so you see in financial markets, a lot of this kind of activity. I think it's important to say financial markets are important, right? Like, I think capitalism is great.
Generally, to economists, I would say that's
there you go,
case.
right?
Yeah.
Like the idea that you want to have bankers and others who are collecting people's savings, collecting capital, finding productive ways to deploy it, that's incredibly important. They deserve a return on doing that. I have no problem with someone.
Like, this is not even really... This doesn't quite align with what he was saying even, but 7 out of 10 bankruptcies at companies with over $1 billion in liabilities were at companies owned by a private equity firm, despite private equity only accounting for 6.5% of the U.S. economy. I'd imagine that's just because private equities are like way disproportionately likely to own companies that are have over $1 billion in liability, and they're probably disproportionately likely to make the riskier investments. I mean, I could also see how a private equity firm would be willing to shut down a firm sooner than sort of more traditional owners would be. I could see that being the case. So, I mean, that could be, you just have to weigh, you'd have to debate how efficient you think that sort of allocation of capital is in that sense.
When making a good living, becoming rich doing that.
Right.
The problem is that the share of the activity on Wall Street and financial markets
An old man in a town into a baby talking about econ. Let's go. Yeah, I know.
represents productive investment, actually causing anybody to build
For sure,
anything
selection
nice in the
effects.
world,
Yeah.
keeps going down. And so even as financial markets, the financial sector as a share of our economy keeps getting bigger share of GDP, the biggest source of corporate profits, the number one place that people from top business schools go to, that keeps getting bigger. And yet in parallel, the actual amount of real investment happening in our economy keeps going down.
Right.
I don't know what he means by that even. It's just the real the real economics meme, okay? I'm allowed to type the N-word to find the meme. The world of everyone, if everyone read Nicholas Decker, I wish.
First of all, I think it's just that's a problem in and of itself, but it also then obviously has incredible consequences for the real economy, for the country as we experience.
Need more likes. This is true. Everyone, smash that like button. Share the stream with your friends. Exclamation mark TTS in chat. So I can afford a cell phone plan.
A critique that has been leveled more on the left. Would you say that is? And you, I think, are more associated with the right. And I guess my question.
Promise if we're splitting a bill. We're not splitting a bill. It's a fixed cost to me. I already spent the fixed cost. The marginal cost of putting you in a room is zero. Okay. You're paying marginal cost. I'm charging you at marginal cost, and the marginal cost is zero. The room I got was less than half the price SMH. I did, because I'm under 21. Not many hotels there accept people under 21. My options were kind of limited.
Question is, do you still have an office where you are? Or have they, once they read this op-ed, did they put you in the mop room? Do you have a window, I guess?
Well, as you can see, I have.
I was gonna look up the real economics.
Oh, I figured they weren't. That's not your real office.
No, this is my office. I'm out in the woods. We have a lot of snow on the ground, but
yes.
No. The nice thing about being chief economist is, I guess you can say whatever you want. But
it dictates its own terms. Is financialization?
They know when you make your own institute, you can say whatever you want. I also, most of the shit Oren Cast writes, like stuff he writes about financialization, it's shit. Like most of that is in service of half the shit Trump is doing. Like he writes a lot about justifying tariffs, and part of the whole issue with financialization, in his view, is that it's partly responsible for like the decline in manufacturing. Like that's very much a Trumpian concern.
Is it a perversion of what sort of the markets is? The critique that, first of all, why do you think it happened? Why do you think that these financializations grew faster than what you would consider to be the economy of real things, jobs and industrial policy?
Does someone have who has the meme? One of you guys has to have it. The real N-word economics versus fake N-word economics. I can't type the N-word in Google on stream. I'll get canceled. Okay. Not fun doing socialism in market housing free. I'm a non-faunist style Marxist now. What? When did I say that? Huh? Chief Knowledge Haver at the Charsky Institute for Hunting Globe Emoji Twitter User Studies.
Policy and those kinds of things. How did this happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the way I understand it is, not quite that it's a perversion. And I think it's also important to say, at the end of the day, the folks doing a lot of this stuff on Wall Street, it's also in a lot of companies that are even operating companies. Increasingly, they try to suck money out for shareholders.
Bro, it's a fixed cost. It is a affordable housing for North. Oh, like I said, I'm charging him marginal cost, which is zero.
Rather than build up companies, it's not like they're doing anything illegal. It's not, they're not even lying about it. It's not a scam. They are operating in the system as we have constructed it. And so the core of the problem in my mind is that, the entire premise of capitalism, you go all the way back to Adam Smith and all the way back to the invisible hand.
The core of your critique is the entire system of capitalism?
No, exactly the opposite. I think that the entire system of capitalism, this is a good point, right? A lot of people say, this is the problem. Capitalism is just broken and can't work. I feel exactly the opposite. I think that the basic premise of capitalism, the idea that you want to have a system where, people are always going to pursue their self-interest, right? So the question is, can you have a system in which people pursuing their self-interest also serves the public interest, so that the things that generate the most profit for you also turn out to be good for other people? And if you go all the way back to Adam Smith and the invisible hand, this is actually exactly what he was describing. The invisible hand has become
for real
magic. It's a bad metaphor because it sounds like this magical force. Like, it doesn't matter what you do, somehow magically it will work out great for everybody.
As long as you don't intervene. I mean,
right.
There we go. Finally, I knew when he had to have it. Thank you, Charsky. This is the Oren cast's ideology. Okay. Like what he says is not. Okay, thank you, North Based. What he says is not like anti modern day like populist right wing. Like, most of it is very much in line with that type of stuff. I believe Oren Cass is written in favor of like even like capital controls to try to control the trade deficit. I could be thinking of someone else though, but I believe he has.
Wasn't the idea of that governments should not intervene in what these markets will create on their own through supply and demand?
Well, that was certainly not Smith's view. That is what it has become for a lot of modern economists. But if you go back, the paragraph where Smith uses the term invisible hand, he only uses it once. It actually starts by noting that he's expecting that people will prefer investing domestically to investing in foreign countries, and that people will prefer to invest in the ways that produce the most things of greatest value. And what he's saying is that if that's true, if somebody pursuing profit, the way they're going to do it is by investing a lot domestically in creating things of value, then it's like there's an invisible hand that somehow ensures that what they are doing in their own self-interest also serves the public interest. So he's explaining how this can work, right? This is like at the very outset of markets, people are like, whoa, what's going on here? And he's saying, no. See, look, if the things that people are doing earn a lot of money also
benefit
good outcomes, then this could be a great system.
It'll be quite stable.
Like Adam Smith, I think the invisible hand quote, I think he used the term invisible hand one time. I don't think there's any point in reading into the like invisible hand quote itself that much, and I don't even think there's any point into like reading into Adam Smith's like exact ideology that much, because he was, obviously the father of economics or whatever. Okay, what he said is important, but I think it's dumb to play these games where you try to like quote snipe people, and quote sniping might be even a little harsh for this, to be fair, but like just try to like be like, oh, Adam Smith was like, I'm going to try to prove in all the ways like Adam Smith actually wasn't like super ultra free market or whatever, or I'm going to try to prove all the reasons why Adam Smith was actually super pro free trade, and politicians today just need to listen to Adam Smith again. Like, I don't know, so stupid. Just talk about evidence. Kill me.
But the way it turned out is the invisible hand sometimes slaps you across the face, and then that's the difficulty.
That's right. I think, and so this goes to my point about like, what are people doing? What's gone wrong? Is it seems to me that people in their self-interest are then always going to look at the system and say like, okay, well, is there an even easier way to make more money? Maybe that doesn't create so much good stuff for other people. And you see over and over again throughout history that happening, right? So if you go back to the Industrial Revolution, you had a period where the Industrial Revolution was working out horribly for most workers. I mean, people were literally getting shorter, dying earlier, and people would say like, gosh, we probably need like some labor laws.
If you're 8 years old, you shouldn't be in fact.
There are obviously some negative externalities from industrialization, and maybe you can argue they should have been priced in. There should have been some policy to deal with it. Now, I don't know why like we're necessarily thinking that
maybe that does.
Adam Smith's logic like doesn't apply here as well.
And that's the difficulty.
That's right. I think, and so this goes to my point about like, what are people doing? What's gone wrong? Is it seems to me that people in their self-interest are then always going to look at the system and say like, okay, well, is there an even easier way to make more money? Maybe that doesn't create so much good stuff for other people. And
the point is, the easier way to make more money should tend to also be in the public interest. It should be something that's productivity enhancing, that has like spillover benefits to other people, or lowers prices, or yada yada yada, frees up capital and labor for other stuff. I don't see the problem with child labor. Easy money 2026. I mean, easy money was saying that in the context of like, literally he just thinks that like a 14-year-old should be able to work a little bit at McDonald's. I don't think that was that crazy of a position.
See over and over again throughout history that happening, right? So if you go back to the Industrial Revolution, you had a period where the Industrial Revolution was working out horribly for most workers. I mean, people were literally getting shorter, dying earlier, and people would say like, gosh, we probably need like some labor laws.
So there were negative externalities from it, obviously. Now, people's income, from my understanding, did rise pretty significantly during the Industrial Revolution. That's number one. Number two, that like capital accumulation, both in terms of like physical capital, factories, stuff that was built, and in terms of human capital, both in terms of like the technical knowledge we had of how to build machines and the workers' skills, those that have like massive long run benefits, right? Like even just slowing down like that accumulation of human capital and like physical capital, but like would have had pretty negative effects on future generations. Like we would have probably caught up eventually. But you should care about being 10 years behind where you could have been in terms of technological progress. And then it's definitely not, I mean, this would depend a lot on what regulation he's talking about and what country he's talking about and when and such. I would say there's a number of like labor regulations and stuff from the Industrial Revolution or after the Industrial Revolution that were probably not the primary driver behind things like the decline in working hours, for example. Like annual working hours have been at a pretty steady decline in the US for a very long time. It is true that like there were some regulations that sort of codified, when workers have to get overtime pay, for instance. But a lot of those regulations, even like, for example, the bans of like child labor were sort of chasing the results of what had already happened. Hot take, Jon Stewart is right about what? Like by the time we banned child labor in the US, it was like less than 10% of I think it was like roughly 12% of children were still working, right? So it's like most of the decline in child labor happened before the laws were passed because incomes were going up. I was just going to say Industrial Revolution, a period of our history where our global trade power grew enormously, had a ton of child labor. I mean, children previously were working on farms, right? It's not like children previously were not working. There might have been, I don't know the relative percentages there. It's possible the Industrial Revolution had more, but I would guess that as a percentage, it would not be that much higher than when people were like homesteading on family farms. What policies do we need to implement to raise the labor force participation of children? This is what tariffs are for. We put the children to work in the iPhone factories, just like China.
8 years old, you shouldn't be in a factory.
Right. Maybe that also. Like, maybe this will work better if one of the constraints we impose is if you want to make a lot of money building big factories, you also have to use adult workers and treat them reasonably. That will work. And then, in fact, people started doing that. And you had what I would call the much more beneficial industrial revolution that led to huge productivity gains, ultimately the creation of the middle class. You had the same thing, at the end of the 19th century with the giant trusts, right? Rockefeller and so forth. And as you had railroads and utilities, people were saying like, oh, like I can make a lot of money if I just monopolize this thing. And well, that's a fair point. And that's where Teddy Roosevelt shows up and says like, well, okay, right? Teddy Roosevelt, Republican, but this system does not work. We actually are going to have to do trust busting. And so I think you sort of go through these cycles where then what happened in the second half of the 20th century, you have the financialization and I think globalization are sort of parallel. A lot of people said, wow. And
it's like, you see how, again, like his writing about this even is not really opposed to any of the stuff about the modern right because he's tying it all to globalization and Trump's epic agenda of restoring the real economy. Kill me. I'm trying to find my charts, my graphs. No, you're right. Farmers were higher, but we didn't have the rate of wealth production like we did in IR. Oren sort of looks like a child. It's true. Who works at a textile? Yeah, he looks like he does. He looks like he suffered from some developmental disorders as a result of working in some coal mines.
Obviously we pursued free trade, we deregulated financial markets.
Right.
And people said, well, this is great. The easiest way to make a lot of money is to do this set of things that does not create good jobs, does not necessarily produce growth. So that's what people started doing.
Look, the algorithm.
Oh, it's a fucking ad. Kill me.
What you are describing feels very akin to my view. Like as you speak, it feels like a salve to my soul. I hear what you're saying. You say, financial markets at profit is a wonderful driver of these things, but to utilize the energy of that profit motive, governments must also find ways to create a more sustainable value for the people through their labor and other things. That's my understanding of sort of what you would think is leftist economics.
Hold on, look. Graph time. Look at a graph. From 1870 to 2010. Average weekly hours and hours per employee. It's like, obviously, I'm sure regulation had an above zero effect on some of these things, but been on a pretty steady decline, even though there's only been a handful of times we've passed sort of regulations limiting working hours. And I don't even think when was the last time we changed the work week? Like the 40-hour work week was like 1920 or something, right? It was quite a while ago. When was insert Destiny voice here? So this is a graph. When was 40-hour work week? 1940. To give lefties their due, does that count multiple jobs? Yeah, it's just average working out. So if you work 2 jobs, to my understanding, this is including both those jobs in that number.
Economics isn't kind of Milton Friedman, the patron saint of this sort of, no, that's not what economics and capitalism is about. It's about pure.
Oh, and also retirement's much longer today too. People used to die before they retired or soon after they retired, but now people live like 20 years in retirement. So not only do you have like lower annual working hours, but you also just have like a lump sum of retirement after you turn 65 to 67 to 70, whenever people retire now.
Profit. And that.
Why do they always hate on my goat, Milton Friedman? Because evil Milton Friedman, libertarian, wanted to privatize, neoliberal, everything horrible. My understanding is that those are numbers obtained by surveying businesses, not individuals. Yeah, that's my. So I don't know for sure about the historical data from 1870, but nowadays, annual working hours, I believe, comes from surveys of actually it might come from the current population survey of individuals, but it might come from the establishment survey. Wait, hold on. They come from both? I think they. How can businesses know about working hours happening in other jobs? Because they survey multiple businesses. Think about what you just said. If you work at one business and you work 40 hours a week there, and you work at another business and you also work 40 hours a week there, if they survey both businesses, the total number of like weekly hours is 80. I'm pretty sure it's the establishment survey though. And they survey, obviously, a sample of businesses.
Pure profit and the pursuit of it is actually what will create the most value. Is this a rebuttal to that, to Friedman, who, I mean, if you could say in the 70s when he comes out, that sort of leads us into the deregulation of the financial markets and leads us into globalization and all these political policies that might lead to incredibly high, capital then wins and labor kind of loses.
Yeah, it's definitely a rebuttal of them. I think the important thing to say in the political context.
Yeah, okay, well, it is from the establishment survey. Stewart comes from the current employment statistics establishment survey.
Though, is that until they came along, this wasn't a left-right fight in the way that we think about it now. So, Friedman and the other guy gets associated with this a lot, Friedrich Hayek.
Yes, and you're going to get some nasty letters from the Hayeks, man. Those guys, they are active online, for sure.
Does Jon Stewart think everyone criticizing him is like a Hayek stan? Really?
what you find is that Friedman and Hayek were not conservatives, and they would not describe themselves as conservatives. In fact, Hayek, maybe his most famous essay is called "Why I Am Not a Conservative." Literally, that's the title of the essay. And
that's his most famous one.
Exactly what you were just describing, which is that Hayek basically says the wonder of the self-regulating market is what produces prosperity, and you just basically have to have faith that it will work and get out of the way. And all these conservatives out there don't have enough faith in that, and that's a real problem.
Right.
And so up until that period, you said kind of the 70s and the 80s. Obviously, conservatives and progressives were fighting about all sorts of things, but it wasn't the conservative view that, well, if we just get out of the way, markets will magically fix everything. I mean, just thinking about that doesn't actually sound very conservative if you stop and think about it for a moment. And what happened in our politics is Ronald Reagan came along. And Reagan built this coalition. Reagan combined what you would call the free market libertarians, the Hayeks and Friedmans, literally guys walking around with Adam Smith neckties.
Do they still sell those?
I don't know if they do. I wanted to reference this thing, so I tried to do a little research.
Right.
I think we've moved on maybe from that. But combine that with the more traditional mainstream conservatism, and then also the Cold War hawks, right? You had a whole bunch of people all of a sudden who were like, let's go start lots of wars.
And it's also, they viewed it as, I think, a battle between communism, which they viewed as sort of a blanket, suffocating state that was dictating terms.
That's exactly right. That's what these groups had in common, was they all believed that the top priority was defeating communism, whether that was in market economic terms, whether that was in social and religious terms.
Putting in God we trust on a coin and then moving on.
And grand strategy from all perspectives. And I give them a lot of credit. It worked, right? They did win the Cold War, and that was very important. But that coalition then sort of lived on even after its animating purpose was gone. And so it's really in a lot of ways after the Cold War is won that things get out of control, that you start just saying, well, we're just going to keep cutting taxes no matter what. I mean, Reagan raised taxes 5 times when his initial reform.
By the way, kind of the Cold War is ending. I don't think since 1991 we've cut taxes no matter what. Clinton raised taxes. I think Obama, I don't know if on net he raised or lowered taxes, because there were temporary tax cuts from 2008, I believe. So I don't know if on net he raised or lowered them, but I believe he raised them after 2008 stuff was done with. Sending John a copy of the deficit myth to make him more annoying to you. Dude, he did interview Stephanie Kelton, didn't he? Or that might have been, I think she went on the Daily Show or whatever. It might have been the Noah or whoever dude. It would be more annoying to me though. Obviously, Trump did tax cuts, but that's someone Cass gonna blame that on neoliberalism and stuff too. I don't know if she's so goated. I don't even think she's not even the best MMTer out there. Okay, I'd much rather listen to Warren Mulzer. I feel like or even Randall, whoever. Okay, big handful of salt. The clinkers say it does not account for multiple jobs based on establishment survey methodology. Okay. Ray, yeah. So AOC is running for president in 2028. Did she actually announce it?
Didn't generate the revenue he wanted. Reagan was a protectionist. Reagan slapped all sorts of tariffs and stuff on the Japanese.
True.
After the Cold War is won, this coalition sort of just keeps going. So you get the economic view that no, it really is just the market is the end unto itself. I use the term market fundamentalism, which people think yeah, sure, it's a little derogatory. It doesn't sound great, but it's also a descriptive term. I mean, what is a fundamentalism? It is a sort of overly simplistic attempt to impose a very rigid set of beliefs, often in a way that completely misinterprets the original texts, but that concentrates.
Are you?
Did not ask him where he saw it. Where did you see it? Way too early to announce. Yeah, that's like what I imagine. It's some Twitter bullshit.
Sure, you're not a lefty. You're preaching, baby.
Kill me.
I keep trying to keep myself from going, amen, Oren. Come on, brother. Keep it coming.
Well, you're going to get me in trouble with this, John. So maybe we'll do a quick 5-minute interlude where I give you some of my more conservative views.
We'll go back the other way.
But, fundamentalist is a sense of sort of not only just reinterpreting texts.
We support her, AOC, not in the primary, but in the general against any Republican who stands any reasonable chance of winning, yeah.
Very rigid view, but that is specifically designed to give all of the authority to this narrow set of people who claim a special wisdom over what must be done. And so this is what certainly right-of-center economics, and to some extent I would say broadly, economics became. It was this sort of almost priesthood, where if you didn't understand that financial deregulation and free trade were going to be great for the typical worker.
No, I don't know. I'm assuming most of my viewers already know this shit, bro. It's obviously not true. It's not even true. The majority of people criticizing Jon Stewart are also they're not market fundamentalists, okay? They're all fucking new Keynesians, okay? They all accept sticky prices and probably to some degree endogenous financial crises. Like, let's just, I guess, the last Nobel Prize winners were talking about growth and shit. I don't know their writings on like sort of more market intervention stuff. I don't know who won the year before that. Acemoglu, right? He's not like a super pro free market guy. Like half of his shit is like, oh, you need a government strong enough to be in the narrow corridor. Before that, I mean, Bernanke, I know, won. And like, I believe Bernanke won for his work on like banking, and specifically like why free market banking, like totally free market banking, can fail. Like he wrote about, I mean, Bernanke has a lot of work in it more generally, but I think he won the Nobel Prize for his work, like specifically about like banking crises and like how the Fed should intervene in them. You can watch. I was watching because it blew up on Twitter and Jason Furman tweeted about it. I watched Jon Stewart talk to like Jason Furman, and you know, Jason Furman's up there like, I agree with the child tax credit. Okay, I like welfare. Okay, I want to raise taxes on the rich. Like even minimum wage, or somebody. There are a lot of economists that support that by now. Do you guys not learn that the large portion of your nation that would never do something? What, like vote for a woman? Or you should pose a student email as a student in an email cast for an interview and then evil debate for hopefully. You know, that might actually work. I think he might just leave.
That was just because you were not sophisticated enough.
Or did they even care?
Oh, I think they did for the most part.
Okay.
My experience, having been in the political world for a while, is like, yeah, there are, you know, outright bad actors, but by and large, if you're an economist, if you're, you know, even someone running for office in most cases, if you want to work in government, you may have convinced yourself of this in some way, in various ways. But at the end of the day, you are trying to do good things, and so a lot of folks really
are you gay?
And let's remember,
not.
I mean, globalization, financialization. This was as much Clinton as it was Bush. It was an entirely sort of
very
bipartisan consensus.
Yes.
And so these folks really did believe it.
Let me ask you when, because my understanding of sort of the shift of this was we shift.
Like, free trade is something is kind of more agreement on than most things in economics. But like even with that, okay, you know, we had Arthur Dorn Hansen, okay, you know, that came out, that was published by like a top journal, like that was published by what, the Quarterly American Economic Review or whatever. Like that paper is obviously controversial, but like there are a number of people who accept the claims in that paper, like Arthur Dorn and Hansen themselves, who are still like respected economists, even though they will say like trade with China hurt the U.S. My ranking of Fed chairs: 1 Volcker, 2 Greenspan, 3 Bernanke. Listen, Powell is goated. Okay, I feel like Powell's got to be top 3 by now. I don't know how I feel about Greenspan. I don't know enough about him, honestly. So Microsoft interviewed an add-on staffer of hers that said they are positioning her to run. Wow. Oh, Emma's now interviewed an organizer on her team that said they are positioning her to run in 2028. Jesus Christ, you're on a device. Just Google it instead of being a contrarian. I don't consider that particularly good evidence. It would not be surprising to me if AOC ran. And I think many politicians are in some sense positioning themselves to run, and that they want to at least keep that option open. That's why a lot of people, like, if you ask politicians, they like just won't comment on it. But I don't take that as particularly meaningful. I don't take that as what was I don't take that to mean you saw AOC as running for president. That seems like too strong of a statement. My econ textbook was written by Greg Mankiw. That was mine.
Shifted from kind of, if I'm thinking about it in kind of epochs, you know, you have the New Deal epoch where it's kind of the government decides we also have to create a kind of framework of a safety net around to help maybe in some ways ameliorate the collateral damage that the system may create for people at the lower levels. And then that begins to shift in the 70s with Friedman and those guys into this the famous
She would be stupid not to this cycle if she aspires to it. I am at, like, I think more likely than not she will run, yeah.
Laffer curve, 1980s supply side.
Oh my God.
Is that what made that switch, 1980s supply in the 70s with Friedman and those guys, into this, the famous Laffer curve, 1980s supply side trickle down economics?
Like, I don't want to grant him anything because it's retarded. It's a dumb, retarded, like, meme understanding. It's all just, like, based on memes. Like, it is true, like, monetarist ideas were obviously more accepted in the 70s and 80s and stuff. But, like, if you just, like, look at, like, how many New Deal programs were, like, substantially cut during the 70s and 80s and stuff. Not that many. Like, welfare spending is still going up in the US. We still have SNAP and its spending is only going up, but, like, in real terms, I don't know for sure about a percentage of the budget. But if you just look at social spending in general as a percentage of the federal budget, that's going up. Unlearning econ taught me about the Laffer curve. Really?
Is that what made that switch into trickle down? And what were they using to kind of justify that? And are the things that you're saying, is that consistent with sort of that understanding of those eras?
Yeah, I think that's a good description of the eras. I would think about it more as a pendulum swinging, though. That I think it's helpful to, in general, think about what happens in our politics, right? The New Deal emerges in response to the Great Depression and, what had been a very minimalist government that clearly was not serving people's needs at that point. And so I think with FDR, you get this real swing of the pendulum all the way from, we're much too far to one side. You come to, okay, we got to fix this, and then swing through to an overcorrection where by the kind of Great Society, LBJ Great Society programs of the 60s.
Is that where conservatives would look at, okay, I mean, they were against maybe the New Deal as well, but is it the Great Society that is the cleaving point for them?
I think certainly if you talk about sort of what parts of the welfare state as it's been constructed that we would say, like, yeah, that was really good versus that's not so good. There's definitely a very different view of New Deal type, social insurance, right? Basic social security.
No, I don't think you trust him. That's why I couldn't tell if you're being ironic or not.
Fair labor standards. You don't see a lot of Republicans out there saying, like, let's get back to child labor or whatever.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple of them.
There's a couple. You can find them. But, by and large, I think people on the right would say those were good. Great Society in the 60s, I think you'd see more of a mix. I think on things like Medicare, obviously that's widely supported.
Right. But wasn't. I mean, Reagan famously came out. I don't know if you've ever heard that great recording of Reagan talking about.
Trump doesn't even Medicare. He needs old people to vote for him. I imagine if Trump thought he could get away with it, he would have got Medicare too. But certainly they don't like Medicaid. And I'm pretty sure Republican states don't even expand Medicare to old people as much as Democrats say to. But I'm 2 for 2 tonight. Please stop viewing me as a schmuck.
Medicare as the socialist creep. He cut advertisements against Medicare.
No, that's right. So that is certainly where, well, of course, you go back to the 30s, you would have Republicans, saying the same thing about Social Security. And so you get, there's both sort of more of an acceptance of good parts over time, more of, I think, an increasingly sharp critique of pieces that didn't work.
Right.
But so you get in the Great Society, I would say, you swing through these were good things that we really should have in this country into, whoa, we're starting to build up some stuff that is creating problems. I think you see the same thing, for instance, with organized labor, where I think the idea of worker power, workers having unions, et cetera, that's a fantastic thing. By the way, Adam Smith did too. But you swing from they don't have any power or representation at all to, okay, good, they have a seat at the table, they have equal standing, to by the 1970s, in a lot of cases, they are actively leveraging that power into a lot of quite counterproductive things, I would argue, in the economy.
And becoming somewhat corrupt in and of their own selves. And using the money and...
I can't believe Jon Stewart. I thought Jon Stewart was going to have balls to disagree with that. I don't really, I don't totally disagree with that, to be clear. I'm not, insanely pro-union or anything. I'm just surprised Jon Stewart is willing to concede that.
Absolutely. Right. And so I think if you think about...
Do you want to keep the boomers alive as long as possible? Ideally. I'm using a canceled hotel to stimulate the local economy. Buy fast food, real.
Sort of stagflation of the 1970s. We were in a very bad position economically. And what the supply siders came in and said, which was fundamentally correct, I would describe myself as a supply sider, is you can't just fix the economy. You can't get the growth you want just through what had become the main government model, which is just give people more money to spend. That at some point, the question is, what are the incentives for businesses to invest and build stuff or not? Right? It goes back to that piece of capitalism I think we entirely agree on, which is you do want the profit motive driving positive behavior.
Right.
And so the basic idea of supply side economics is to say, look, one of the best ways to spur growth would actually be to improve the incentives of people to invest and build and grow businesses. That can be good for workers too.
You know what's crazy to me, and I wonder if Oren will correct him ever. Jon Stewart has used the term supply side economics to just describe anything that helps corporations. He describes the Fed interventions in the credit market during 2008 to be supply side economics. And it triggers me because I've seen him do it so many times and no one has corrected him. He just thinks supply side economics is synonymous with anything that like helps evil corporations. Next time you're in Live and Learn, ask if they want to keep the boomers. Well, I know Soy Pill doesn't. Okay.
True. I think that's correct. But I think that then you pull this pendulum back in the other direction. You do some things that are more business friendly. You create a better environment for investment. That's great. And then that swings straight all the way through to anything that's good for corporations and leads to more profits or reduces taxes is
True.
Right? And same with, okay, you know, we did have over.
That's what economists say.
Regulation in a lot of cases. Well, therefore,
Thank God they brought Oren on to clear this misunderstanding of. But yeah, I saw your chat, Easy Money. I don't entirely disagree.
Right, and we did need various types of deregulation. Let's swing that all the way through to just the less regulation, the better. The market will automatically work. And so I think we sort of got all the way back up to that side of the pendulum, and now we need to swing back down again.
So then it becomes, what are the tools in the arsenal that can help us swing the pendulums back?
And if that weren't mostly true, what isn't mostly true to you?
And
or
does
what?
the policy
As if it, what is mostly true that you're referring to?
Discussion become, all right, are the tools, you know, tax incentives, disclosure rules?
Was it Jon Stewart Daily show segment of Andy Bashir? I did not.
Or as you were saying, like limits on buybacks. Or so what are the tools now that we look at, you know, or the metrics that we look at that tell us we've gone too far? Is it, you know, I can point to wage growth. You know, you don't get a tremendous amount of wage growth.
No.
Income inequality tells me the system is out of balance. What are the tools that we can use then that bring it more back into that balance?
Yeah, so that's exactly where the rubber meets the road.
Business growth equals wealth production for all of us. Oh, well, I don't think, I mean, in fairness, I think they would grant that as some general presumption. Although I think they would, I mean, they've gone over it. Nowadays, people, they are squeezing the employees and squeezing consumers more, and they're not doing investment that actually benefits anyone. It's just all bullcrap and financialization or whatever. But would you vote for Lefty Sam or Gavin Newsom if they were two presidential candidates? I mean, I feel like Sam just because I just like trust Sam to have smart takes. It's like, and like make smart decisions. And it's like I kind of trust Gavin Newsom to do that less. And I don't like I don't know if their policy would differ like substantially. Not on 2040. True. Thoughts on the Mariel boat lift? I mean, you know, you could Sam or Nick Decker. Obviously, Nicholas Decker. Are you kidding me? What do you mean? Obviously, Nicholas Decker. Easy buddy. Like you could spend the whole Sam would invade Israel. That'd be funny. Okay, maybe Sam then. Easy buddy. You can spend a lifetime on like literally just debating the evidence from the Mariel boat lift. So like, I do not feel confident like giving a strong opinion on my exact feelings there. My understanding, George Borjas's research is probably, you know, spurious and has sample bias, and like its sample sizes are way too small. I think David Card's research is probably better, but still not the best out there. My general understanding of it is that it probably did not lead to any substantial or persistent decline in wages for the county or for the state as a whole. And looking within skill sets, I would guess that led to some decline in wages, but my understanding is that was not sustained. TLDR in the boat lift, it was a essentially, I think it was from Cuba, right? It was like a bunch of Cuban immigrants that came over to Florida in a relatively short period of time, so we use it to study the effects of immigration. There's like a ton of studies on it, and they're all controversial and as such. What is your opinion on Rubio if he were to be the next nominee? I mean, I think that's from the options, probably basically the best one. Short-term crime spike? I'm not familiar with the evidence on crime one way or the other. Yeah, it was Cuba's. Mass immigration of Cubans who traveled from Cuba's Mariel Harbor to the United States between April 15th and October 31st, 1980. After 10,000 Cubans tried to gain asylum on the grounds that Peruvian embassy, the Cuban government announced that anyone who wanted to leave could do so. An estimated 125,000 Cubans had reached Florida. Rubio's like a worshiper. Can't say that. Fucking hell. Of human suffering. Listen, I mean, that's just all the Republicans. So, you know, he's probably not, if of the people who I think are like have some degree of prevalence in the Republican Party, probably the best option. But Control F crime. I was just making sure I had the context right for Supringo. I don't really. It's not. It wouldn't be surprising to me if it did have some effect on crime. What's up? 07777. How does it help the middle class? What? Real. Massey or Rubio? Dude, I thought Thomas Massey was supposed to be normal, but I haven't seen like anything remotely normal from him. Okay. I feel like I was being lied to. I don't know. I couldn't tell you for sure because I don't really know. I don't really know much of Thomas Massey's actual policy, to be fair. So.
Wrote on all this. And I think it's interestingly where you start to see some of the traditional political divisions reemerge. Because, you know, my view is it's a real problem if you have left and right disagreeing on the diagnosis.
Massey's principle, but he's far from normal. Okay.
Do they disagree still, or is it feels like there's still disagreement?
Less, okay. much less so. There's some. So I think if you look back to, you know, the 2000s, let's say, the Republican Party had really dug into a position of saying, essentially,
he's an isolationist. Maybe probably Rubio then, I don't know.
Achieved equal opportunity, everyone can succeed and build a great business. And actually, if we adjust the numbers in this way, everybody's wages are going up. And therefore, you would be surprised how many people's full-time job is to adjust the numbers to show that wages are going up.
Yes, I'm sure.
Unlike Oren Cass, whose job it is to adjust the numbers to show tariffs don't increase prices. Let's go.
But, and sort of therefore, ta-da, we don't need to take action on any of these fronts because, in fact, everything is going great. And you'd also see that on things like, you know, I think like climate change is another quintessential example where, well, we're not sure if we acknowledge that climate change is an issue, well, then are we going to just have to embrace the Green New Deal?
I vote for Rubio over AOC? That's wild to me.
Let's just say that it's not a problem. And I think, you know, we have plenty of issues of that type on both sides, I would say. You know, we could talk about ways where, you know, the left doesn't want to say that something's a problem because if they do, well, then what right of center answer do we have to accept?
Sure. Well, you're seeing that now with the argument about housing supply, where you'd say, you know, they want to say that this is a problem, but we don't want to also say that overregulation might be a problem, especially, you know, environmental regulations that may have to fix it. So you have, I see those tensions in any.
Okay, I thought it was going to be way worse. Okay,
and so,
whatever,
you know,
whatever.
That is a very unhealthy partisanship, right? Like there's nothing partisan about trying to figure out what is actually happening in the world. We should be able to reach a common description of that. Now, we might apply different values to it, say which parts are good versus bad. So conservatives might say we're comfortable with a relatively higher level of inequality than progressives might. But we shouldn't be disagreeing on what that level is.
Or that it exists.
Exactly. That's right. Okay. Or what direction the trend is in and so forth. And so, you know, something like financialization, I think, is a great example of this, where there are a lot of very difficult discussions to have about, okay, what would you do to address this? But we should be able to agree that the scale that Wall Street has grown to and a lot of what it's doing just is not creating value in the world.
That's right. And the percentage, you know, you talk about.
I don't. Kill me. First of all, I don't know how many economists are with them on the actual financialization of the economy or whatever. But again, I think their general perception of economists is just totally wrong. They are substantially more. They're not all fucking free market fundamentalists. They are substantially more center left, right, or center left or center right, or favor a decent amount of welfare, a decent amount of intervention in the credit market, or whatever. And Oren Cass is not even, respectfully, because I'm not either, not even qualified to really arrive at a description of the world in the way that traditional economists do. He doesn't have a econ degree, like any econ degree, and like economists, to be fair, is pretty like gate kept. Like you kind of have to be a like PhD or like pretty cool in some other fashion to like get the actual title of economist. But yeah, you can go through like the UC Chicago polls and it's not in significant support of stuff that's moderately left wing. Yeah. Definitely agree on more things with Rubio than AOC. Yeah, but for one, I think many of the things AOC would try to do would not get passed. And for two, I just don't think Republicans generally have like the same type of like respect for the country that like I think even AOC has.
About it in the article, the idea of financialization is sort of what percentage it takes up of economic activity.
Yeah.
And you were saying years ago it might have been at 10%, but it has doubled, meaning that these sort of financial instruments, and is containing it so difficult because, in truth, I would imagine financialization is more agile than industrial policy. Certainly investing in manufacturing or warehouses or creating value for workers takes a much more stable uncertainty. Is going to throw financialization is, hey man, I just came up with this idea. What if we bundle mortgages? It seems much more agile.
Yes.
And harder to catch up to.
I think that's exactly right. And so that's a great sort of way into.
I'm trying to see, is there a poll of like, I wonder if there's a poll of support for raising capital gains tax. I'm not sure there is. There is more like general stuff probably. I mean, they have something in a wealth tax, but it's not really should we do it. It's whether it would reduce inequality, which I think most would say yeah, but they shouldn't do it. Wealth tax would be an effective way to reduce inequality. 33% agree, 19% strongly agree, 23% uncertain, 10% disagree. That's UK. Who gives a fuck about the UK?
Into this question of what do we do? Because I think, one place where I at least perceive still very large differences between how, someone like I would think about addressing this versus folks on the left is I think the more left of center view tends to be, okay, we essentially need to find the things that we don't like and prescribe them and sort of construct a regulatory apparatus that is going to sort of keep these things in bounds, figure out which ones we do like versus which ones we don't like.
And like in the case of 2008 saying, well, maybe banks shouldn't leverage at 35-1, 40,
right.
Creating, stress tests that don't allow it to become a hydrogen bomb for the economy.
These were all like, hold on, just real.
All right. Hi, Jason. Thanks so much for joining us today.
What the
I'm
fuck?
thrilled to be with you.
Yeah. So I want to first start talking about something that has captured.
Sorry, sorry, the video started auto-playing the poll website. Jesus. Real quick. Hold on. This is just like, and I actually don't know if there's anything on here on specifically banking, but like this has, I think, Penn Bernanke, like Janet Yellen, Greg Mankiw, obviously. Like, I mean, Janet Yellen, efficiency wage models of unemployment. And like, this is a textbook, so it's not necessarily like arguing for any, specific policy, but oh my god, would you look at that? Like Greg Mankiw, allocation of credit and financial collapse. Ben Bernanke, non-monetary effects of the financial crisis and the propagation of the Great Depression, and also Ben Bernanke and Alan Blinder, credit, money, aggregate demand. And like those are all gonna, I would imagine, include models of like why interventions in the credit market and stuff are necessary. And obviously Bernanke, especially, is this autofocus fucking sucks. It's like a kind of an area where he focuses on, like these were like pretty centrist economist dudes like writing about this shit, bro. There's a non-insignificant chance Rubio is worse than Trump has been. I don't think he'd be worse than Trump has been. I think he'd do some conservative policy I wouldn't like, and I think he'd like would abuse some of the power that Trump's gotten, but the executive branch more generally has gotten. Although, to be fair, I think like it's possible AOC would do that to some extent. Like, what would AOC do with the shares that we have in Intel? I think most Democrats would more like it would kind of just sell them, but like AOC might do some weird shit with them. To, in fairness, I think for her goal would be to like benefit the public, and I think Trump's goal is just to help himself. But
I'm a traveler man. I'm a rambler man. I like to see the world, which is rent. We built every rent payment energy points. You can redeem them. Flights, hotels, lift rides, Amazon purchase.
you're ending? No.
So much more. And by the way, starting in February, built.
Enjoy non 420. R// Destiny. Is that a streamer? Do I care about this?
You're yelling at one of the few people that does give
Oh, yeah, I saw this clip.
a fuck about trans people in general, okay? That's all you're doing. Democrats don't give a fuck about you. They would literally shoot you in the fucking head if it meant that they would be able to secure additional electoral wins. Shut the fuck up.
So true. I don't know what you want me to say. I think he's incorrect, and I think the characterization more generally people have that Democrats like threw trans people under the bus is just like way too hyperbolic. The code is correct. It's just not. It's not true.
Members can earn points on mortgage payments. You can get some for that. So join the loyalty program for renters at jointbuilt.com/TW to use our
pages generating thousands of pages of regulations that in a lot of cases end up doing things like saying, well, if banks can't make certain risky loans, banks will instead lend to this new set of institutions that we will call private credit, and they will make the risky loans. And to your point, that will typically be more agile than the regulators will be.
And a lot of that stuff, though, is added in by, to be fair, by lobbyists for these financial institutions.
Yes.
The difficulty, again, is you also have a Congress that has much more access to the lobbyists for these very rich financial firms than to the people.
Wait, so what is the lesson that they're taking from this?
That they're sort of, trying to help avoid these catastrophes.
Yes, but it is important to take that as a baseline reality when you're deciding what we should do, right? In other words, I do get very frustrated with my friends on the left when they're like, no, but this would have worked better if not for the lobbyists. I'm like, well, did you have a plan for there not being the lobbyists? Because if not, that's...
Well, poor people need better lobbyists. I've always said that.
I think the question of how you represent workers more effectively is a super important one.
Well, I think the idea is for the left that
Because like, I don't think Oren Cass is like entirely wrong there. I think like you should take that into like you should that is a real problem with government regulation. Is a potential for rent seeking and a potential that it causes some worse outcome than what initially was happening, because people will find ways around it that are, in this case, riskier investments through the private capital. Like,
your representatives are your lobbyists. In other words, you look to them as a bulwark against that financial group rather than this kind of entity to be corrupted or swayed by it. That you kind of view it as that's the balance.
And that sounds fantastic. And then I would again say, and how's that working out for you, right?
Not fair. That is not fair.
We conservatives are pragmatists.
Why does Jon Stewart he just doesn't have a response to this though? What are we doing?
So how do you design it? How do you catch up to? Because they're kicking our ass. I mean, that's the...
So true, chip and go. I don't even know what that means. That's just a meme. I don't know. It could be. There could be some truth to it, but obviously Bernie has deeper ideological objections to the millionaires and billionaires. Okay. I don't know.
The thing that makes it so difficult is they're so much more agile, even in the way of, let's use your sort of example of part of financialization is in some ways like setting up microwave towers right next to where the trading is going so that you're making all your money on volatility or payment for order flow or all these other kinds of invented or gamifying it so that it resembles more, FanDuel than it might anything resembling the real economy. And the SEC is completely overmatched. What are the things you can design to get ahead of it? In pragmatic terms.
Right. So what this leads me to is to think is that what we really need is quite sort of blunt, broad-based constraints.
Like Volcker rule kinds of that one page, if you're a bank, you can't use savings to finance your whatever adventurism and financialization.
Right. So very clear lines, what kinds of institutions can and can't do. Very clear transparency and disclosure requirements. So if you are planning to collect 7% of people's investments in fees to yourself, you actually have to publish that very clearly. So that, a pension fund knows that's what you're doing. Things like just stock buybacks are not allowed, which was the case until 1983. It's very funny. You say we should get rid of stock buybacks.
Oh my God.
Well, it was also U.S. law for more than 200 years. So, we're
right. But they say
That's not true. It's not U.S. law for 200 years. It was a total meme too, which is a reason to think like stock buybacks aren't really bad. But it's not even, I believe, we granted exemptions for them, or like we like specified what under what cases specifically they were allowed in 1983. Hold on, where's the thing? Following the adoption of Rule 10b-18 in 1982, amended in 2003 by the SEC, which provided a safe harbor for companies engaging in share repurchases. Before that, companies usually avoided stock buybacks, but not completely, because they could be charged with violations of anti-fraud provisions of the Securities and Exchange Act in 1934. The rule created 4 conditions under which companies were allowed to buy back stock. They were legal up until, I thought he listed the year. My understanding is they were legal for a while. Then we sort of made them not technically illegal, but legally dicey. And then 1982 is when we specified under what conditions they could happen. What do you do, young man? This is pain. Fun.
Anything you do is, you really are, you're wading into a battle that I think the left has been fighting for a really long time, which is there's this strange kind of dichotomy that if the government intervenes with the market, in quotes, on behalf of labor, that's Marxist. But if they intervene on behalf of financialization, easing their road, that's capitalism. Like, I think that's the frustration. You talk about, I understand the frustration that
kill me. There are like some I don't even think that many Republicans do that, bro. Because they don't even care. Because they all the Republicans who support intervening in favor of capital or whatever, they're all post-liberal, anti-capitalism people by now, anyways.
You may have with the left, but that's the frustration I think that the left has. That there's this, as you said earlier, kind of this dogma. The government doesn't pick winners and losers. And I think if you're on the left, no, it does all the time. But it just picks the winners that have the most access to it and the most money. And that's our frustration.
I think that's right. I think it is a frustration on a large segment and a growing segment of the right as well. I mean, you've seen obviously a very sharp fallout between Business Roundtable and Chamber of Commerce and so forth, and the right of center in the Republican Party, because I think there's an increasing recognition, and it goes back to that point about just like what are the basic facts, that this really isn't working.
Oh my God!
And we really do need to understand why it's not working and do something about it. And the thing that I always emphasize to folks on the right is, what we have right now is not sustainable, right? Like, the cover your ears and tell people things are great.
What parts of it in your mind are least sustainable? Like, what is it? Inequality? Is it, what are the things specifically that you're looking at that you go, man, we're creating something?
When we don't have any manufacturing, and college-educated workers,
the personal level,
can't get jobs.
The national level.
Okay.
And I'll just hit the macro one first, it's a little quicker.
Right.
The reality is that the U.S. economy, it performs great on the measures like stock market valuation and top-line GDP figures and so forth. Our actual capacity to make things, to create jobs, to innovate, to compete with China is in sharp decline. And
that's not really capacity. That's not true. Like, as a percentage of GDP, it's down, but like just industrial production is not sharply down. It's been relatively stagnant since 2008. It's not sharply down.
Or that, above all else, is not going to produce the kinds of outcomes that we want. And so, whether it is on these questions of financialization, if it's on these questions of trade and industry, I think there's an interesting sort of immigration dimension to it, and the extent to which we sort of say, well, we're just gonna have to bring in, we can't find the workers we want here, so our solution is to just bring in somebody else. The formula we have settled on is not one that is actually conducive to the liberty and prosperity of the United States. And I think we are on what many people rightly feel is a downward slide that we need to reverse.
Now, wouldn't people on the right say, no, reversing it is an artificial contrivance, that what we've learned?
Like, I think in any other world, again, Jon Stewart would probably see this. Don't you see how he's only leaning into this anti-capitalist left-wing stuff or whatever because he's supporting the narratives of the current right wing? Like, the two things he said were most unsustainable were free trade and immigration. And right now, the Republican Party hates free trade and immigration. Like, can you not see what he's doing? You don't see what he's doing here? Capacity is the wrong word. It's capacity. It's overblown, but it's a problem in the long run. He said, he said capacity. What's your opinion on the fact that tariffs have probably slowed the reindustrialization of the U.S. because manufacturers' equipment, because the basic manufacturer equipment we need to buy new materials are Chinese? I don't mean by what my opinion on fact is. I think that is likely true. You want to see a cool graph. This is a graph of the z-scores, which is like the difference in the, or like how far something is from the standard deviation. So it makes essentially it makes these relative to like historical norms, and it makes all the regional banks, which have slightly different methodologies, like comparable of the input cost for manufacturers versus their capital expenditure plans. You can see usually they move together, and post January 2025 they start going opposite directions. We start seeing input cost go up and capex plans go down in z-score in like relative terms. So like technically when I say go down because it's z-scores, it doesn't necessarily mean that like magnitude itself went down. It just means like relative to the standard deviation historically, if it's up or down. What's this money? Was that previous divergence spike? Where? Here? Or how much of your audience is socialist? I don't know. I don't think that many. Gavin is that 08? This is like 2008. Doing based development and reindustrialization by making raw materials and machinery way more expensive like a boss. Exactly. Don't worry, in the long run we'll have all the equipment here though. Then we'll finally be able to make those iPhones from all American parts.
Is financialization, financial services, legal services, tech services. We're actually, manufacturing is the old economy. We're actually creating the new economy. And why would you want to go back to that? I disagree with that view, but isn't that what they would say? They're getting out of the way and allowing these future markets to dictate our economy.
There's a small and shrinking and declining in influence group that will go down with the ship saying that. I would say it is, at this point, pretty far out of the mainstream, certainly within the Republican Party and Republican politics, and in a lot of the sort of, newer publications, the kinds of programs younger people are participating in. There are very few people at this point who would say, no, that things have been going well. This is the right track.
Even as they point to, look at our GDP. It's, you realize it's 7 companies and AI data be used.
Yeah, no, so that's a perfect example. I think you'll find, and again, the politics is politics. People whose job is to promote how well the Trump administration is doing will point.
Okay, first of all, what group of people is he referring to here? Is he referring to when he said the Republican Party? But certainly you can't be referring to economists, because I thought they were all neoclassical, neoliberal, Milton Friedman, love free trade people.
They're not. They're getting out of the way.
Small and shrinking and declining in influence.
Future markets to dictate our economy.
There's a small and shrinking and declining in influence group that will go down with the ship saying that. I would say it is, at this point, pretty.
Me for real.
It's, you realize it's 7 companies and AI data centers that we don't even know will ever be used.
Yeah.
What they're being, like, the ones that are already constructed are being used almost at like full capacity from my understanding right now. That's part of the reason why they're building so many more. And it's also like 0.3% annualized GDP growth last quarter. It's not like that crazy. Also, if you hate stock buybacks, if you I can't believe all these companies are doing stock buybacks and not investing in shit. These companies aren't doing stock buybacks anymore. They're investing all their stuff in capex for data centers. But apparently that's bad too. Okay. Omega wants the old economy. That's fair. I recognize that.
fine. And again, the politics is politics. People whose job is to promote how well the Trump administration is doing will point to the things that show the Trump administration is doing well. But in the actual sort of intellectual debates, today's equivalent of what Friedman and Hayek were arguing in a prior generation.
Oh, can you explain the libertarian reasoning as to why the government is the only reason monopolies exist? It doesn't make sense to me. Their reasoning is essentially dumb. The only thing that creates monopolies is when companies are prevented from entering the market, and the only thing that can really do that is government regulations that prevent new companies from entering the market or new technology from being made. That is their argument.
You won't find anyone anymore saying, but
at least the one I've heard.
100 things are fine. That's a punchline, not an actual argument.
Right. Okay.
And I think you see that even if you look at the sort of next generation.
A mix on buybacks, allowing it or not, both have different poor incentives. What's the bad incentives from allowing them? I think there's like some potential for poor incentives with regards to some CEOs like doing buybacks at strategic times to make their pay package bigger. But what would the other like poor incentives be? I'm also not sure how common that is. Price manipulation? How is it price manipulation? You can't like just buy your own stock to make it artificially inflated or anything. You either take on debt to buy it, which is risky. That increases the payments you have to make in the future, and that would offset any rise in stock price from buying your own stock. Or you use your cash to buy it, and that just decreases your company's book value. So that would offset it as well. There isn't good evidence. You can look at the empirical evidence. There's not good evidence that like stock buybacks increase stock prices through that mechanism. There's evidence that stock prices can increase because of the sort of signal that stock buybacks have. But that occurs if you look at companies who announce buybacks, their stock prices go up even if they never actually follow through with the buyback, because the insiders are sending a signal that they think the company is going to do well in the future, that they're confident that they're being undervalued right now. This is the redefinition of monopoly, usually where you can have like 90% of control of an industry, and that's not a monopoly because other companies still legally try to compete. Yeah. Why did you post a 1 minute short? Because I was streaming when I was debating the TikTok girl. I was also going to stream the TikTok thing as a stream to YouTube Shorts, but for whatever reason, the screen was just blacked out. So I started stream thinking I could fix it, but then I couldn't fix it. So I stopped the vertical stream. Every American should buy leveraged 500 to 1 stocks for shitcoin stocks. Real.
Of leaders on the right of center. And listeners are free to support them or not. But if
they're free to do that now. We don't. 6 months from now, they may not be free to support them or not. We don't know what's going to happen.
I suspect that freedom will persist just fine.
All right.
But on these issues that we're talking about, if you look at
no
what
pushback.
Marco Rubio was doing in the Senate, if you look at Josh Hawley, Bernie Moreno, who's a new senator from Ohio, Jim Banks from Indiana, this is stuff that they talk about all the time and in these terms. And so I think the newer, it takes time obviously for these things to turn over in a political party, but at the staff and writer level and at the political level, I think you see a pretty significant shift, certainly on these macro questions, on the need to reindustrialize, on the need to take.
This is real. This is true.
Hasn't that then coalesced into something more coherent at the policy level? And this gets into maybe a larger discussion, and it's one that I stepped in shit in last week with.
Okay. Pushback. Okay. Let's go. Come on.
Economists being very angry that I'm confusing economics with policy. But when you talk about that, why hasn't that shift in mindset created a more coherent governing philosophy of economics? When I look at the Trump administration filled with these, I'm assuming more right of center economists and people of that thing, it feels incoherent. I'm going to take 10% of Intel. You know what? I'll let you sell chips to China, but you've got to give me a cut of that. Oh, also, I'm going to put 50% tariffs on Brazil because I don't really like the way they treated Bolsonaro. And you sort of can't wrap your mind around what we are and how they're designing these policies, not as correctives for pendulum swings or societal ills, but as kind of impulse, like giant baby impulse.
Well, I think what you have with the Trump administration is President Trump. And right? I mean, I think,
fair enough, fair point.
to my point, in parallel to my point to the left about taking as a baseline reality that you have the lobbyists, there's also a baseline reality that the head of the executive branch is Donald Trump. And Trump is someone who, as you just described, tends to go in a lot of different directions.
I call it tantronomics. Tantronomics.
I just can't, again, I feel like in any other reality where like Jon Stewart was not getting the criticism for the economic stuff that he needs Oren Cass to back him up on, like if you saw a clip of Oren Cass saying this, he'd be like, what the fuck? Like, this dude's a total hack. Like, what the hell? Like, I just have to take it for granted that there's this crazy, insane, like, toddler in office. Like, what do you mean by that? Like,
I think what's so fascinating about him as such a non-ideological person is that I think that actually had some real benefits in his willingness to reject everything that had been standard Republican dogma.
But you can't replace it with a sort of nihilistic and vindictive.
Well, so that's right. So the metaphor that I always use is the building metaphor, right? Which is that like demolition is an important part of a rebuilding process. If all you do is demolition and then go find the next thing to demolish, you are less likely to be remembered as a great builder.
I see. So you're saying right now we're in the East Wing part of our economy, but we haven't yet gotten to the ballroom. We're waiting to get to the ballroom of the economy.
I think it is certainly fair to say that there has been a lot of demolition.
Yes.
And I think the interesting thing when you mention, take 10% of
what demolition that we've seen so far would be at all conducive towards a later fucking flourishing. I mean, I obviously disagree with like sort of the goal itself as Oren believes in it. You know, there might be some limited types of industrial policy I would support, but like not that much of it. Like, I disagree that even the sort of goal of raising manufacturing employment substantially is like good. I see no reason why that would be preferable to the comfy, higher paying service sector jobs that many college educated people in the US get, that lead to a lot more innovation that can have positive spillover effects on a lot more people and the such. But like, what, it's not like we haven't seen manufacturing jobs go up. What do we take as a source for poor incentives? I found an academic paper, but it's a biased search. Like, I don't know what you mean by, I mean, you can send it, I can check it out. I don't know, like, what conceptually the poor incentive would like even be, like, by a lot, like, to the extent that any company wants its stock price to go up, does it have a poor incentive to find any way to artificially manipulate it? Do you think Trump would have a stronger or weaker cult if progressives didn't capture every institution? And I hate you. I hate you. I'm sorry. I hate you. I'm sorry. I hate you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I hate you. And Dems govern like Bill Clinton, social economic, like, I just, sorry, it's triggered the fuck out of me. I don't know, but I just cannot believe we're placing any, like, the onus there on, like, how dare progressives capture every institution, as if Donald Trump is not doing that. And did a ton of shit with Doge and doing it for much worse aims, and it's just like fundamentally like just not care about our Constitution. It's just like, bro.
This company and so forth.
Right.
What you see at the sort of fundamental level is in fact a shift toward, we are going to do industrial policy.
Or a state-run capitalism. But, we get into this loop now, which is how do you then prevent the kind of kleptocracy and feeding at the trough of the patrons of the president? It's very hard to look at any rebalancing of the economy when people can say, but the president has benefited by the tune of $4 billion through the course of this. Isn't, at the base of this, we have to preserve what kind of got America to this point, which is a baseline of there are stable rules of the road that we will honor, that allow for, they always say in the economy, the worst thing is uncertainty. Have we lost that was our gold standard? And how do you rebuild? Before we can even tackle the kinds of remedies that you're talking about, don't we need to rebuild kind of that baseline stability?
I don't know when I said anything that implied that you were asserting that Trump cared about the Constitution. I don't think anything I said implied that you thought that. My criticism was that it's like a very, it's frustrating when so many conversations are taking for granted, okay, that there's someone in office who doesn't care about the Constitution, who is trying to control every institution in the executive branch in a way that Democrats did not try to do. And the conversation is not, the conversation is focused on, well, how much better could Democrats have done if they just didn't do this like woke thing and have DI in sports and like, bro, like it's just frustrating. It's just frustrating.
Yes, I think that's an incredibly important point, that there are certain, when we think about the sort of interaction between politics and the economy, this is one of the things that was so lost. Like, it's funny, there didn't used to be a field called economics. It was called political economy. People called Adam Smith a political economist. And it was only really in the 20th century that you defined this separate field of economics, which was, just with math and abstract models and so forth, we can kind of say what should be done.
Oh, that's all economics is.
The political dimension is almost always inseparable, certainly at the level of what...
It's like, obviously, the field of economics has a lot of empirical research. It has a lot of math. It has a lot of actual models. But I mean, they're like John Stewart, like just talk to, I mean, in fairness, behavioral economists also use math and models and the such. And I think that's also not a bad thing. I think it's good that we've developed more robust empirical methods and testable models and the such. But like, bro.
Be doing.
But don't economists try and have it both ways? I have to say, one of the things I felt disingenuous about, we talked to Richard Taylor last week, which, by the way, I love talking to that. I thought it was a great conversation, but there were a lot of economists that were really pissed, not at him, at me for ignorance and all kinds of other things. But one of the things they were pissed about is, you don't understand the difference between economics and policy, but don't they want it both ways? Because they don't just study it in an ivory tower and put it in a terrarium. They're in the room when these policies are made. They are incredibly influential in design.
Again, the criticism of John Stewart is that he didn't understand that economists, as a matter of optimal policy, supported a carbon tax. He just like could not wrap his head around it because he was like, isn't economics all about maximizing shareholder value and as such? And when he said like, since when has economics been for public welfare? It's like, I think Trump enjoys a lot of oppositional benefits, which gets him a lot of excuses because people just hate wokeism that much. I'm just saying the conversation itself is frustrating. The focus, the framing, is very frustrating.
Defining the parameters of our economy. And yet if you criticize that, it stirs up, they're, if I may say, very mean. They're very mean people.
Yes. So I completely agree with that. I think in debating circles, we refer to that as a Mott and Bailey, which is, are you familiar with the Mott and Bailey?
I am not familiar with the Mott and Bailey.
Oh, let me tell you about the Mott and Bailey.
I would like the Mott and Bailey.
The Mott and Bailey is the configuration of a medieval village that had, I might get them backwards, but I believe the Mott was the small fortress on top of the hill. And then the Bailey was the sort of open village area that everybody preferred to live in.
Okay.
And so you lived out in the Bailey. And then if, the barbarians were attacking, you could retreat into the Mott.
Solid move. Well designed.
There you go. And so the Mott and Bailey form of argument is you sort of spread out and make these very expansive claims and sort of have a great time. And then when you actually get attacked, you retreat to this much narrower thing that you can defend.
And then when you're in your Mott, you yell insults at anybody who dares.
Like the Monty Python.
Yes.
But as importantly, as soon as the attackers have gone, all right, fine, and moved on, you spread right back out again into your Bailey.
Well, they've been bailing my Mott. I don't like it, buddy.
Oh my God, they got a fucking another ad in this shit.
Body at rest. Stop paying for too much wireless. Just 12-month plan. Limited time.
That I think is very important is that, yes, there is an important, valuable discipline of economics that has useful insights that uses both analysis and data to make useful points that we should consider when we are making public policy. And then there's the actual policy-making process. And
I thought the data and the math was bad. I thought economics was all math and data and, really should be a field called political economy that doesn't... What? I thought we were trying to insinuate that the data there was not particularly useful.
Economists have gotten very comfortable asserting that their narrowly useful technical insights dictate what policy should be. So our model shows that free trade is efficient.
That's right. If you only follow them, right.
Therefore, anybody who questions our prescription of free trade is an idiot. And it's like, well, actually, I understand your model of free trade. Here are 10 reasons why in the real world, like, first of all, maybe I just have values for optimizing around other things. Second of all, here's ways other people are going to behave that you're not taking into account. Third of all, here's what's going to happen to our politics if we do that. And if we undermine our politics in that way...
Kill me.
What do you think is going to end up happening?
First of all, if economists are the ones doing the research on like the effect free trade has on like political outcomes
in the real world, like first of all, is an
and they like it's like economists will obviously make theoretical models that they acknowledge will like make assumptions that might not always hold up in the real world. But for one, like almost like any social science is going to have theoretical models that might serve as a useful approximation of the world at least in some cases, but aren't necessarily like super robust to real world applications and would necessarily imply a super strong prescription in favor of something. But there just like is like a lot of empirical evidence that like disagrees with very specific claims that Oren Cash makes about, you know, trade and tariffs, for example. Like, you know, the stuff he says about prices not rising. You see that Clab got frame mogged by an ASU frat leader. I'm going to be so, I don't even know. What does frame mogged mean? I know what mogged means. I don't even know what, I've seen people say frame mogged. I don't even know what frame mogged means. Rich literature argues that stock repurchases often serve as a positive economic signal, to beneficial to investors. Yet, due to their inherent flexibility, open market repurchase programs have long been criticized as weak signals lacking commitment. We evaluate whether some managers potentially use buybacks to mislead and buyback announcements to mislead investors. We focus on cases where managers were seemingly under heavy pressure to boost stock prices and didn't I concede this? It sounded like I literally remember saying there are certainly going to be cases where like managers on like it's essentially like a agent what's the other thing? Kill me. I recognize at a manager level there can be bad incentives, and there are certainly cases of I said price manipulation. That's not what I get from price manipulation. What I get from price manipulation is not managers having an incentive to like boost the stock price to boost their pay package. It's the fact that like the firm as a whole has some incentive to like artificially inflate their stock price by buying their own stock, but it's just not true that like stock buybacks persistently or consistently do that. But I recognize like on the short term, there are going to be cases where someone can announce buybacks which lead to more positive expectations to like boost their pay package, or because they're under heavy pressure. The last few sentences: for suspect cases, the immediate market reaction to a buyback announcement does not differ from that generally observed. However, over long horizons, suspect firms do not enjoy the improvement in economic performance otherwise observed. In that case, the stock price would fall back down. Presumably, suspect firms repurchase less stock. Further, managers in suspect firms have comparably higher exposure to stock options, and potentially endogenous results suggesting greater sensitivity to both shock valuation and future equity dilution. Overall, the results suggest only a limited number of managers may have used buybacks in a misleading way as cheap talk. Yeah, this is literally what I said. I don't disagree with this. I literally said this before you like this. Yet, as theory also suggests, we find no long-run economic benefit to this behavior. They're referring to, to be clear, they're not referring to stock buybacks here. They're referring to suspect stock buybacks, right?
It's like, well, actually, I understand your model of free trade. Here are 10 reasons why in the real world, like, first of all, maybe I just have values for optimizing around other things. Second of all, here's ways other people are going to behave that you're not taking into account. Third of all, here's what's going to happen to our politics.
And also, even if you have values for optimizing around other things or whatever, in order to make that judgment, presumably you want some estimate of like the magnitudes and direction of the effects, and the research and tools of economists are going to be the ones that you use to answer that.
If we do that, and if we undermine our politics in that way, what do you think is going to end up happening to the economy, and so on and so forth?
And it creates a credibility issue.
Yes.
That I think undermines, rightfully so, and I probably consider, in the way that I think a lot of people view the Iraq War as a kind of cleaving point for American credibility, right, overseas. And again, you probably can go back to the 60s and 70s and say the Vietnam War did a very similar thing. I think the 2008 financial crisis, and maybe it's been an overcorrection against that credibility, but really, for something that was so devastating to the broader economy and to the jobs and to and labor and all that, and the direct result of the financialization and instrumentation of the economy, I've been surprised at how resilient the architects of all that remain in the economy. How is that?
Well, I think at least until recently.
What does he even mean by that?
Priesthood.
The architects of that, as in like the firms that financialize the economy, or the people who bail them out, or what?
It really, for something that was so devastating to the broader economy and to the jobs and to and labor and all that. And
I found like 8 other papers. Don't yell at me for saying obvious, please. Not your paper. I am gonna crash out your video. Okay. What I hear when someone says like stock buybacks lead to like price manipulation or whatever, it's not like an individual manager like has some incentive to, on the short term, try to artificially boost the stock price by announcing buybacks are both going to crash up, because I literally specifically said in my explanation, I recognize, but like before you said anything, okay, I recognize there are going to be cases where individuals might have bad incentives with regards to doing that. I literally said there are going to be cases of CEOs and managers and such like trying to game the system to get a bigger payout, or because they're under pressure from management to reach some arbitrary like goal for stock price or whatever by the end of the quarter. And we're going to that. I still think that happens that often. And I don't think that's what people, if that's all you mean by price manipulation, then fine. But the implication when you say price manipulation from stock buybacks is, I think, that more generally stock buybacks manipulate prices of stocks upwards, not that in certain cases people have some way to game the system. And I said it was admittedly a biased search, but you said that after. Again, I explained I already agree with the point that you're supposedly making. I said I don't even know if I trust them, but you could give me a source threshold, and you didn't. I don't know, because I don't disagree. First of all, like I don't know exactly what it would depend on the claim that you're making, the type of source I would need. Because again, the source you sent me does not disagree with me. It is literally exactly what I said. It is exactly what I said before you raised any objection to me. So I don't need anything to change my position on that. If the case, or if the point you want to prove is that stock buybacks more generally, like artificially raise stock prices, I would need some evidence published. Either published in an economics journal or like an economics adjacent social science journal, not just like a think piece from the EPI or some stuff like that, or even I would take like a working paper from a like actual economist. I would weigh that. I don't know what exactly would be sufficient for me to update past the point of like 50% on stock buybacks, like artificially increasing prices, but if the claim is just what that paper said, then that is not a claim I ever disagreed with. In fact, I explicitly stated basically that claim that they said in the abstract.
And the direct result of the financialization and instrumentation of the economy, I've been surprised at how resilient the architects of all that remain in the economy. How is that?
Well, I think at least until recently, this goes back to the sort of priesthood phenomenon. They were the arbiters of it. I mean, you can even find all sorts of great papers, unsurprisingly, about how the Great Financial Crisis was not their fault, which are technically the authoritative.
Sure. It's in the journal. If it's in the journal,
it's in the Journal of Financial Regulatory Economists. It turns out that they had nothing to do with it. But I really do think it's the double whammy of the.
Want to keep arguing? You doubt like it created port incentives? Remember? No. Hold on. I'm gonna crack. Okay. You recognize I never disagreed with the claim in his paper. I literally explicitly said what this claim was. I recall asking you what you meant by poor. I asked you what you meant by poor incentives, and you said price manipulation. I already told you what I get from price manipulation is not a claim I already agree with. What I get from price manipulation is that more generally a claim that I disagree with, that stock buybacks like artificially increase stock prices. Prices
that everybody preferred to live in.
Okay.
Reasons why in the real world
economic signals. I've got
stop paying for too much wireless.
Just economics that has used public policy, and then there's have got your model of free trade. Here,
approximation of the world. Tariffs, for example, price not rising. Did not try to do.
Familiar with the Motte and Bailey?
Oh, let me tell you.
Insinuate. They imply a super strong prescription in favor of. I know what MOG means. I don't even know it. I've seen people say like stock buybacks persist. Oh, that's all. How back was the price manipulation thing, the initial one.
So the metaphor that I was using, right?
Effect. But like I found out. What do we take as a source for poor incentives? I found an academic paper, but it's a biased search. Like, why only be able to make those iPhones from all American parts? I thought it was after this, but maybe not. Well, might have been before this.
small and
here.
This is the right thing in out of the point shrinking
by the service.
Those are way. Magnitude itself went down. Fuck. How far back was it? Kill me.
What's going to happen?
TikTok thing as a is can increase it, which I'm also not sure how common that is. Price manipulation? How is it price manipulation? You can't like just buy your own stock to make it artificially inflated or anything. You either take on debt to buy it, which is risky, that increases the payments you have to make in the future, and that would offset any rise in stock price from buying your own stock, or you use your cash to buy it, and that just decreases your company's book value. So that would offset it as well. There isn't good evidence. You can look at the empirical evidence. There's not good evidence that like stock buybacks increase stock price. So that's me talking about stock buybacks generally. So stock prices can increase because of the sort of signal that stock buybacks have. But that occurs if you look at companies who announce buybacks. Their stock prices go up even if they never actually follow through. They think the company's going to do well in the future. That they're confident that they're being under monopoly because other companies still legally try to the TikTok thing as a So I started streaming 101 stocks for shitcoin stocks for real.
Of leaders on the right of center.
And prior to that, I mean, when I first mentioned stock stuff, also what's up, Carnaval. I'm from North Carolina. Right. The thing that can really do that is government regulation.
Promote public company.
The only thing that creates some buybacks, allowing it or not, both have different poor incentives. What's the bad incentives from allowing them? I think there's like some potential for poor incentives with regards to some CEOs like doing buybacks. Like literally the first thing I said, times to make their pay package bigger. But what are the other? If all you mean by price manipulation is what I said immediately after reading, allowing it or not to have different poor incentives, then why didn't you just say, oh, that's what I mean by poor incentives, Don Fawn? Like poor incentives be. I'm also not sure how common that is. Price manipulation? How is it price manipulation? And then you said price manipulation, and I go on to explain what we just watched a few seconds ago of why, like you like more generally, you don't like can't just like artificially increase your stock price by doing buybacks. Like I don't know what part you think I'm missing. If all you mean is, can you just answer by price manipulation? Do you just mean like what this abstract says and what I said immediately after reading your thing, where I said I think that in some cases managers will have bad incentives, like individually to try to do stock buybacks to meet some deadline or increase their pay package?
Financial fallout from the Great Recession and the sort of
yes. Then why didn't you just say that immediately? Why do you keep disagreeing with me when I've been repeating that?
Industrial fallout from free trade with China that are these, because that also was such an iconic, I love quoting Larry Summers on this point. I think I can still do that maybe a little bit longer.
Wait, the room just got cold. I don't know what happened.
And he said, how's that price manipulation? I said, what I get from price manipulation, especially, I'm not told enough, I'm going to be gaslit. Because, first of all, if that's all you meant, I don't know why the 100 other times I said, is this what you mean by it? You didn't just say yes, or you didn't just say, oh yeah, that's what I, like the thing you're describing, that's what I mean by price manipulation. And I kept asking about the repeated. I mean, no, you're not. I asked about the I said what I get from price. I literally remember saying almost word for word, what I get from price manipulation is not the bad incentives that this paper is talking about. What I get from price manipulations is more generally that stock buybacks have some artificial effect. That's not true, Chippergo. I'm not like disagree with you. What I get when I hear someone say price manipulation in this context is not what the paper was talking about that you sent me, that I explicitly agreed with before you even said the words price manipulation. What I get is that more generally stock buybacks, you're suggesting stock buybacks more generally have some artificial effect on inflating stock prices. And I don't believe there's evidence for that.
He testified before Congress as Secretary of the Treasury that, economists disagree on everything. On this, there's only one answer. And, they kind of, Clinton White House walked these Nobel laureates up to the briefing room to sort of lecture people that, if you did not see how great this was, you
does it delay chat? You had so much time and opportunity.
Just were not smart enough to understand it.
Right. You don't understand the science and you're an idiot.
And then even worse, it carried on after it was obviously wrong. So, I worked for Mitt Romney's presidential campaign in 2011, 2012. And Romney actually was, because he came from more of a business background, was very focused on the China issue and the ways that free trade with China was clearly not working out. And this was, 10, 12 years into this debacle.
I thought the economists were all free trade fundamentalists.
Denied it. That's just not true. Free trade works well for everyone.
Oh, apparently they all denied it.
And was it a misunderstanding of that sort of capital can travel, but
ignore the many papers there are in the China shock finding that it cost net jobs, or that it, I mean, that there aren't like, I'm familiar with like 3 that say it cost net jobs. I'm familiar with a little more that say it cost like manufacturing jobs and net. No, the biggest one, Arthur Dorn Hansen, I don't think it's particularly good, to be clear. But like, there are plenty of economists with pretty nuanced views on the China shock, and plenty of them who think it was in fact net bad.
But labor can't? Is it just the advantages that capital had in this new like electronic world economy that labor just was naturally going to get its ass kicked?
Read my last message. Oh, you can press the button and U.S. GDP increases by 2x, but all welfare, Social Security, food stamps goes away. Pre-transfer inequality is not increased. Do you press the button? Probably. 2x GDP immediately is probably worth it.
You know, I think that's a piece of it. I think the 2 other problems, though, one is they always just assume that trade would be balanced. So if a whole bunch of capital fleet
oh my God.
something cheaper in China, that's okay. There's going to be something else that we may not, we make here now to trade for the stuff from China. And it was a sort of rock solid principle. It was actually Paul Krugman wrote a famous essay talking about what should we teach undergraduates about economics. And one of the core things was trade deficits are self-correcting. So you can't have a long-term, I was on a podcast with him last.
First of all, I think that might be a little further than what Krugman said. Maybe I'm wrong. Last 15 years have been a golden age in innovation of international economics. I must now somewhat depressingly conclude, however, that this innovative stuff is not a priority for today's undergraduates in the last decade of the 20th century. The essential things to teach students are still in the insights of Hume and Ricardo. That is, we need to teach them trade deficits are self-correcting, and that the benefits of trade do not depend on a country having absolute advantage over its rivals. So he does say, so hold on, is there another case of the self-correcting thing earlier? Because that's another like conclusion. No. He does say here, not fun, disproven. When you teach them trade deficits are self-correcting. And I think that's probably true in the case where you're not running a massive persistent budget deficit. That's probably as a generality true. But definitely not going to be true for the U.S. when we have a persistent budget deficit and we're the reserve currency. But he did say, do we trust Krugman? I think Krugman's stuff on trade was pretty good in the 1990s especially. Krugman is a smart guy. He won the Nobel Prize for his work in trade. I think the rest of his essay is pretty good, though. Oh, it's literally the only time trade deficit is mentioned, really? That's why I don't remember it despite reading it, I guess. I mean, he does say it, to be fair. Non-fun, wrong, disproven. Oren Cass, epically owned, non-fun. But it's one line in the conclusion.
Last year and mentioned this to him. He didn't remember, of course.
He must have been very excited to hear about it. He must have been very excited to be reminded of that.
And I said, no, I'm always ready to read the quote as needed. And he said, well, that was naive.
FYI, if you think I'm ever counterproductive to your stream, just let me know. No worry, I'll let you know. Don't worry. It's just...
I was like, well,
oh, okay. Well,
yeah,
that's credit to him.
I wish you hadn't written the accompanying essay suggesting that people who could not understand your economics should be ridiculed because ridicule is more powerful than actually trying to argue with them.
Yeah, I'm aware of that as well. Well, that's my Mott and Bailey.
Should be well.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah,
that's credit to him.
I wish you had.
Is he talking about the accidental theorist?
Written the accompanying essay suggesting that people who could not understand your economics should be ridiculed because ridicule is more powerful than actually trying to argue with them.
Yeah,
I don't know what he's referring to there. He could be referring to the accidental theorist, which is like not really what that is. I wish he said what he was referring to, but like Krugman wrote around the same time. Well, let's just see. This is 1993, and this is 1997. I feel like that's too long to be accompanying. So maybe not, but he criticizes someone in here that wrote a book saying like we were going to lose all these manufacturing jobs and everyone would, like, unemployment would be like huge or whatever. Rolling Stone's reporter William B. Grider has just published a widely heralded new book titled One World, Ready or Not, The Manic Logic of Global Capitalism. And in his book, exactly what I've described, a massive panoramic description of the world economy, which piles upon fact some of the crucial facts turn out to be wrong, but that is another issue, and an apparent demonstration of the thesis that global supply is outstripping global demand. Alas, all the facts are relevant to that thesis, for they amount to no more than the demonstration that there are many industries with growing productivity, and the entry of new producers has led to a loss of traditional jobs. That is hot dog production is up, but hot dog employment is down. Nobody, it seems, warned Grider that he needed to worry about fallacies of composition, that the logic of the economy as a whole does not apply to is not the same as the logic for a single market. I know what he would answer. Well, I'm taking mere theory. His argument is based on evidence. The fact is, however, the U.S. economy added 45 million jobs in the past 25 years. Far more jobs have been added in the service sectors and have been lost in manufacturing. Grider's view, if I understand it, is that just reprived that any day now the whole economy would start looking like the steel industry. But it's a purely theoretical prediction, and Grider's theorizing is all the more speculative and simplistic because he is an accidental theorist, a theorist despite himself, because he is wary, readers imagine that his conclusions simply emerge from facts, unaware that they are driven by implicit assumptions that could not survive the light of day. Nevertheless, needless to say, I have little hope that the general public, or even most intellectuals, would realize what a thoroughly silly book Grider has written. After all, it looks anything but silly. It seems knowledgeable and encyclopedic, and is written in a tone of high seriousness. It strains credibility to assert the truth, which is that the main lesson one really learns from those 473 pages is how easy it is for an intelligent, earnest man to trip over his own intellectual shoelaces. Why did it happen? Part of the answer is that Grider systemically cut himself off from the kind of advice and criticism that could have saved him from himself. His acknowledgments conspicuously do not include any competent economist, not a surprising thing, one supposes, for a man who describes economics as not really a science, so much as value-laden form of prophecy. But I suspect that Grider is the victim of his own earnestness. He clearly takes subjects in himself too seriously to play intellectual games. To test drive an idea with seemingly trivial thought experiments with hypothetical stories about simplified economies producing hot dogs and buns would be beneath his dignity, and is precisely because he is so serious that his ideas are so foolish. I don't know. I don't think he's talking about that, but this is the only thing I could think of. But it doesn't sound like he's saying anything about ridiculing people. Where's the last chat from? I know the icon. Oh, this is from Trovo.
That's my Mott and Bailey. Now you're just misusing terms left and right. But this was sort of the MO of all of this. And so if you figure, a whole bunch of stuff will go to China, that's fine. We'll get something else instead. Maybe that could have worked out. But it turns out that was simply wrong. And then the other core assumption under all of this economics.
What do you mean? There's plenty of stuff you can find. First of all, it's I don't know what Orncast's justification is for necessarily even thinking that, like, he didn't give a number, but how many ever jobs were offshored to China? Because how do you separate out that from just more general productivity effects where we just got more productive and manufacturing employment declined because we automated a lot of stuff, and like demand effects where, you know, as income rises, just like the percentage of income that people spend on manufactured goods falls. Like, how do you separate out those effects from whatever trade we had with China? Because I think if you try to, like, it seemed like maybe 12%, like 1/8 That is equal to 12. Hold on. What is 1 over 8 equal to? Oh my god, 12.5%. Yeah. Maybe like 1/8 of it, of the decline in manufacturing share of employment, is attributable to the China shock. But I don't think much more than that.
Hate talking about is that all they care about is consumption. Like, quite literally.
Drew, this is what all economists say. Drew, yes, Drew, or guys, yes. Yes, Drew Krugman has never written anything about new trade theory and economies of scale expanding production. What is that about? What? Huh?
Defines the good is having more stuff to consume. And in fact, it defines work as the bad, right? The ideal economic outcome.
Explain this. What does that mean? Because I'm familiar with, sort of the consumer index and consumer spending being 70%.
I mean, like, the assumption is people work so that they consume, generally speaking. And there are plenty of caveats to that, and obviously economists will discuss and make models for, like, people doing volunteer work and the sort of comfort compensation differentials, right? The fact, like, jobs that are kind of easier to do or more comfortable tend to pay less than those that are harder to do or involve being in extreme conditions like that. Like, no one is saying that 100% of the time, like, this is gonna be the case, or that is it for me to audio crackle. It might be happening for everyone. I don't know. It's probably my shit. I can fix it.
Defines the good is having more stuff to consume, and in fact, it defines work as the bad, right? The ideal economic outcome.
Explain this. What does that mean? Because I'm familiar with, sort of the consumer index and consumer spending being 70% of the economy and all that. But isn't work productivity what they would define as productivity, or is that still only defined as it is to consuming?
It's so in the formal economic models, it is for the sake of the consuming. And so, Jason Furman, who was chair of Obama's Council of Economic Advisors,
right?
Now teaches the intro-level econ course at Harvard, gave a speech a year or two ago in Geneva at a WTO, World Trade Organization convening, where he specifically noted that, economists know that imports are the good thing that we get, and exports are just the bad thing that we have to do to get more imports.
So it's basically we're all working for the weekend.
Well,
that's
yes.
what we're, yeah, all right.
Like, there are nuances to that, but there's an awesome freeze frame for him, by the way. But, like, it's clear to see, like, the Econ 101 reasoning there. Exports are us using our own domestic resources to sell stuff to foreign countries for foreign currency so that we can buy foreign goods, which are resources from their country that we get to consume.
Exactly. Right. All right. So the ideal, if you're kind of, they do what they call scoring policies, right? We're going to run our model and see what's the best policy. The ideal policy would be one where we get just everything we want to consume and don't have to do any work.
I think that's Elon's future. I think that's what he says is going to happen.
Like that, like. Okay.
Well,
obviously, these are, like, in generalities, and every, like, economists are going to be, well, I appreciate stuff and buy cheaper and go, are going to be the ones to think on the margin the most. And, like, it's true that a lot of economists, people more generally, would have, worries that, like, oh, if we were to automate everything, or if we were to just, import literally everything and had some automated exports going on or whatever, with no exports, right? No work. Like, maybe there's some deeper human meaning, okay, that would be lost because we just didn't engage in work anymore. But first of all, probably not at that sort of diminishing marginal point right now. And I don't think it makes sense to bake that into any models that we make for scoring policies, unless it's AI stuff, maybe, because I think that has a much broader potential to automate shit. But
this is an interesting question, right? Would that be good or not?
Right. Well, wouldn't that make, see, this is such an interesting, because from the sort of the powers that be within the tech world, the new billionaires that are going to design the whatever dystopian world we're going to live in, they look at, the gig economy, that automation and AI, not only is it, going to replace us to certain places, it's better that it does. That they look at it in the way that you're saying, which I think misses out also on that people want to feel relevant.
Yes.
That's an important part of life.
Yeah.
Is the feeling that what you do through your labor matters in the smallest of ways, whether that, it's that idea of we all would like to be essential workers. We don't want to be replaced. We just...
It's like, literally in Econ 101 classes, they teach you, like, oh, jobs that are more desirable jobs that are like more individually meaningful to people, like oftentimes those jobs pay less because there's like more competition for them. Last thing, fuck Jon Stewart for being such a confident ignoramus. This is true.
Want a wage commensurate with being able to live, not paycheck to paycheck, for that relevance.
Yes, that's exactly right. And this is the core of the point that I try to make, and my organization, American Compass, focuses on, is the idea that there are a lot of things we actually need markets to do. So again, we love capitalism. We want markets. We think markets are the right way to organize an economy. We want them to work well. And what that means is there's actually a lot of things we need them to do besides just give us access to cheap stuff. And one of the most important is be generating jobs in the places where people live, aligned to the kinds of things they can do that allow them to support families.
Right.
And so we're all the way back to the Adam Smith invisible hand thing again. Are the things that are happening in our economy the kinds of things that generate that outcome? And economics formally is just completely blind to that.
Well, certainly financialization is, for sure.
Well, that's right.
What do you mean?
Financialization, it reflects a market where the incentives are not to do that. Economics as a field of analysis just doesn't really have a way to measure that, right? So when you see GDP go up, that doesn't tell you anything about whether it is going up in a way that supports those things or not.
Oren, let me ask.
That's why you... Do you think economists don't try to measure like the inequality there? The potential inequality there?
A lot to do that. Economics as a field of analysis just doesn't really have a way to measure that, right? So like, when you see
it, in a sense, he's correct in that it's hard to like make an estimate in like dollar terms or like in a comparable way of like the benefit of having, you know, jobs that are maybe more conducive to building a community and maybe, you know, benefit small towns more as compared to superstar cities or whatever. Number one, if you're going to, you know, make an estimate of that, I think the work of economists is going to be the people who make the closest approximation of that, right? They're going to be the ones studying that. It's going to be their tools you're using to try to make that estimate there, right? And there are already tools for doing so, and there are already economists who try to do so. You know, who make public welfare functions and who talk about the negative and positive externalities from trade, and the rising inequality from trade insofar as like it leads to the growth of like superstar cities, but, you know, hollows out the Rust Belt and stuff. Those are all mainstream economists like working on those things. And then second of all, who are you putting in charge to do it? Am I supposed to trust the Trump government or the Oren Cast government or the Marco Rubio government or like are we trusting the Republican government to put these initiatives in place to accomplish the sort of nebulous social goals that you want to accomplish with these economic policies?
See GDP go up, that doesn't tell you anything about whether it is going up in a way that supports those things or not.
Oren, let me ask you this, because I remember, and maybe this is because it was kind of a self-regulating proposition, but if you remember, there was a movement, it wasn't even that long ago, 10, 15 years ago, that ESG movement, where corporations were now also going to judge themselves or be judged on whether or not their economic production was also positive or a net positive. And they created sort of these different parameters about environment and social justice and these different things. And it was a disaster, politically and otherwise.
Yes.
Why would that be, given sort of what we're talking about?
If I may make a respectful point regarding the left at this moment.
Yes.
Well, ESG, okay. The idea that we do need to care about things besides profit is very important. One of the most unfortunate elements of ESG was that it said the things that we therefore really need to concentrate on more are essentially the progressive DI. Right? So there was a very heavy focus on climate change. And what are you doing to reduce climate change?
Although a lot of it was, to be fair, a lot of it was lip service. I mean, a lot of it's kind of...
Oh, absolutely. But to the extent that you want to take it seriously, it was not actually focused on the set of things we've been talking about here. Are you investing domestically? Are you creating the kinds of jobs that are going to allow people to support families?
I see what you're saying.
It was focused on the set of essentially the left of center side of this elite that is generally happy with how things are going on, but
believes in climate change,
policy priorities around things like climate change, a certain conception of social justice,
and maybe ill-defining it. Yeah, although the social justice part, I've always been so surprised at the pushback on, especially for those who I would think, if you think about social justice,
we're letting the climate change slide, but not the social justice DI shit.
In terms of markets, aren't these communities that have been traditionally excluded, oftentimes explicitly by the law, couldn't you just reclassify them as emerging markets and suggest that you wanted to create better investment in emerging markets to create a larger, more meritocratic system ultimately?
Wait, what Trump did of opportunity zones.
It was surprising to me that it was viewed so negatively. Because they're basically taking a legacy system and kind of breaking it down.
Right. I mean, I think that, again, if you're just putting your hat on as a business leader trying to maximize profit, what you like about an emerging market typically is it's a place to generate a lot of profit. And in the US, as you've defined it, for the most part, those groups that have typically been excluded, places that have been left behind, those don't tend to be the places where a lot of the profit opportunity is. And again, short term, which is which is what they're looking at, and which connects back to another of the big problems of financialization, which is when you're making all of your money in financial services, to some extent in tech, in media, you can generate a lot of growth, but you are making the most profitable things, the boosting and lifting up of those narrow enclaves that are already doing best. And one of the most powerful things I think we need, and again, I think this is where you'll then get different answers across the political spectrum is, okay, what does it mean to drive more investment back out into the rest of the country? In my view, you aren't going to get that done by basically making a bunch of rules saying you have to go do that. What you want to do is create these very broad rules. Even taking a tariff as an example, you want to create a broad rule that says it's going to be cheaper to sell something that you've made in the United States than it is to sell something that you made somewhere else.
Wow.
Which is awfully difficult when you think about the imbalances of regulation overseas and what they get away with paying people and what their standard of living is. That's a really hard thing then to engineer, isn't it?
Well, that in my mind is exactly the argument for something like tariffs, is to say, if all we want is the cheapest thing, then this is great. If Chinese slave labor makes it, it will be cheaper.
The problem with the tariffs, though, is ultimately, and again, not to push back on the dearest of our leaders, but ultimately that ends up being a regressive tax on consumers and the people that can least afford,
Okay, we got a little bit of pushback. Okay, a little bit, okay.
Pay that premium. And that money may not come back to them in investment. So aren't we punishing the very people we purport to help?
There is potential for it to be regressive. There's actually a wonderful,
potential for it to be regressive? What a fucking cock, dude.
He's an economic historian officially named Michael Lynn, who makes this point I think is so important and wrote a great essay for us about it, that it's really important to remember that the progressivity or regressivity of our income, of our tax system, isn't the primary question. It is a secondary thing that we do to make up for all the other inequality.
How else do you make it up?
Taking tariffs as an example, if we do things to restructure our economy in ways that are actually going to benefit typical workers, left behind parts of the country, are going to
so the tax itself is regressive. It is potentially true that if you increase manufacturing employment, which I don't think tariffs are likely to do, especially the way Trump is doing them, but regardless, that maybe that makes more low-paying jobs and less high-paying jobs and reduces inequality. But then you have to analyze whether it's a net benefit based on all the costs that you impose to consumers, which I guess Oren Cass doesn't care about, okay, and to businesses and the jobs that otherwise would exist in the, for example, service sector industry that do a lot of other cool shit. But that's all financialization, fake stuff, so we don't need to worry about that.
Ideally generate better economic outcomes. If that comes alongside less progressivity in the tax system, but the end result is better jobs and opportunities for the typical worker, that's a great outcome.
But isn't that wouldn't you say the CHIPS Act? Isn't that what that would be? And then so why on the right was that such a controversial and negative response to it? That sounds like, in terms of what you're saying, almost the perfectly designed political program to do such a thing.
What a problem with the CHIPS Act was DEI.
Yeah, so I love the CHIPS Act. We pushed very hard for the CHIPS Act.
I saw that bumper sticker on your car.
That's right. I'm a huge hit at cocktail parties. Ultimately, I think something 16 or 17 Republican senators voted for it. And so you're right, it's something that it divided the Republican Party at this point, because you had the more old guard folks who were like, oh, that's not what we do. And you have an increasing segment that say oh, yes, actually, this is what we should do.
And maybe more positive than tariffs, which they support across the board.
But this is the key, is I think you can't do it all through those kinds of policies, right? You can't go and find every industry and everything you wish we did and design a government program to boost it. I think that kind of industrial policy can be really valuable where you have a particular must-have thing. So semiconductors is a great example. You're seeing it now with critical minerals is a great example. But if you want to think more broadly about, we want people investing in the US, bringing back the kinds of things that can be done here productively, you do need to address that problem you just described, which is labor and environmental regulatory issues, just baseline wages and so forth. There are an awful lot of reasons.
There's no... Oren doesn't even understand the models for this stuff. So John Stewart's not going to push back on him, and I could go over for the 100th time all the reasons trade increases net jobs and increases net or average productivity and average wages, and I see the potential for increased inequality, but I don't think that effect is particularly negative. I just want to see. If I can find this thread between Noah Smith and Oren Cass. Where Oren made it clear he doesn't understand some of the basic models of trade. Oh shit, no, sorry, I'm not thinking of Oren Katz, I'm thinking of Michael Pettis. My bad. Hold on, I confused this with being Oren Katz. I thought this was Oren Katz with Michael Pettis. I'll go over it for context or whatever, but it's complete nonsense. Basically, every trade theory, Ricardo, Heckscher, Oren, Krugman, will show cheaper imports increase the welfare of workers on average. Only if it increases domestic production. Directed exports, Ricardo, for example, show that the welfare maximizing consequences of competitive advantage can only be expressed in exchange of goods. While the idea that consumption is independent of value of goods and services produced may be widely accepted among academics, it requires that income too be separated from the value of goods and services produced, and that can be sustained only as long as consumers are willing to borrow for or otherwise pay for consumption by transferring assets. I don't know why it's so hard to understand that consumption depends on production. Did not say directed exports in the passage above. You only said it leads to an expansion of domestic production, which makes the above statement false. A simple example to show this. Suppose I produce and consume 2 oranges and you produce and consume 2 apples. Now we open up trade. I still produce 2 oranges and you produce 2 apples, but now I trade you 1 apple for 1 orange. We now consume 1 apple and 1 orange since people have a taste for variety in fruit. This trade is welfare enhancing despite 0 expansion in domestic production. However, if you add the word directed exports, as you did in your tweet, the claim makes sense with a few assumptions. And then he complains about trade deficits and savings and more bullshit.
Not to build things in the US. Other countries give so much more support to their producers in a lot of cases. And so we do need something to offset that.
Meanwhile, we've got, even within our own country, a kind of miniature globalization dynamic in that there are certain states that work to undercut the protections and wages of other states. You know, the kind of, so we're almost facing that same battle at home that we're also facing overseas. And in this model, is there anything you can do to address that aspect of it?
Yeah, it's a tricky balancing act, because the flip side is that we like the idea of states competing against each other in constructive ways, right? There are all sorts of things we would say it's good that states can go their own way. If states are actually competing on, like, who can have the most efficient process for permitting something new, that's good. We should want that. And so the sweet spot, it seems to me, is you need to have good national baselines, right? You need to have the national labor law, the national employment standards, the national environmental standards, paired with then allowing and encouraging states to compete with each other. And so I don't think we have it exactly right, but I would say that it is actually one of the real benefits of the American system. That
I guess, I assume, you know, he would hold that for other countries as well. It's just that, it'd be impossible to get some national baseline or some international baseline for this shit. Which is silly anyways, but
that we have some sort of flexibility and give and take in that.
Federalism.
That I think on balance probably benefits us.
Right. So ultimately, as we sort of bring it all around to a circle, you know, you describe this kind of pendulum swing from labor to capital and all these things, that financialization is kind of a metastasized version of what that is, and different policies that can kind of gain it to get it under control. Can I ask, is ultimately, is it a product of A, obviously I think it's more agile than our political system, but B, is it a function of the fetishization of growth over, you know, we see that in a lot of areas, you know, the stock ticker is down at the bottom of your screen as though that's a, you know, an actual important way of determining the health of the economy when it's just this tiny part of it. Does the fetishization of growth skew all these incentives in favor of these quick hit, big profit, doesn't build the types of stability and industrial base that you're talking about? And is that a problem that goes all the way back then to Friedman, which is it's about maximizing shareholder value and these guys coming in and working purely for that?
I'm glad you brought it around.
That's what Friedman said.
That's where I end my essay as well, is on the point that there also
that's as great as contribution to, if you read Friedman Schwartz, okay, that's all it says. It takes like 600 pages to say, we should maximize shareholder value. Okay, that's what.
Policy discussions to be had, but in the final analysis, this is also a cultural question. You know, there have always been ways to make money that are just not good things to do, that are embarrassing, frankly.
Greed is good. I mean, that's the catchphrase from the 80s.
That's right. That was one of the sort of transition points. You know, there are plenty of ways to go make money that are legal in the United States today that most people would still say, like, oh, like, that's not going to be the top thing the college kids are going to the recruiting presentation on.
Right.
And so I don't think it's exactly the fetishization of growth, because I do think growth is good. I think, you know, in the periods where the United States, where the economy is working best, people were absolutely obsessed with growth.
Or the right metrics of growth. Maybe it's...
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's where the problem is that, and this connects back to sort of some of what especially the more sort of market fundamentalists got wrong, is there's been a very concerted effort to make the case that any pursuit of profit is productive, and anybody who makes a lot of profit, that must prove that they've done something valuable. And I think it's just, and that is a cultural issue. As long as people believe that, it's going to be.
I mean, there's like, among libertarians, there's like a subset of like praxeologists who do that. But no serious economist really does that.
Very hard to sell them on.
I mean, like, as a general presumption that, like, making a profit represents you responding to, like, consumer demand. Like, there are plenty of people who do that as, like, a general presumption, I guess. But that is not the goal of everyone to only prove that.
That's where the problem is that
prove that's only, like, that's the only reason you can make a profit.
And this connects back to sort of some of what especially the more sort of market fundamentalists got wrong, is there's been a very concerted effort to make the case that any pursuit of profit is productive, and anybody who makes a lot of profit, that must prove that they've done something valuable. And I think it's just, and that is a cultural issue. As long as people believe that, it's going to
be gamified financial system, and is maybe sort of crypto the poster child for the direction we're moving in. That is the antithesis of what you're talking about.
I think that's right. I guess that is what gives me optimism, that I think we've finally sort of hit the reductio ad absurdum of it is impossible to look at what's going on at this point and defend it. And I think people are starting to see, and it's funny, like, of course, my editor was like, you have to make this more in like everyday terms, things people see. And it's finally at the point where you can do that, right? Like whether it's your experience trying to figure out how to watch the football game or youth sports, or now you do see young people obsessed with prediction markets and crypto. Like
Kalshi and Polymarket. I mean, that's if you're looking at the growth segments, that's where it all seems to be going. And that seems to be the opposite of what we're talking about.
What?
Yeah, I mean, someone pointed out, if you watch the Super Bowl ads this year, you'd think our economy was driven entirely by, chatbots, prediction markets, and weight loss drugs.
Right.
And I think there's a way in which it is so obvious at this point that these things are not correlated with the actual well-being and human flourishing. That is the point of all of this. That I think there is increasing potential for a political response.
And you have an optimism in that, because it's almost like looking at it as financialization is sort of it's standing in for political failure.
Yes.
Right. Well, you have this conversation, and I say this with great respect, has convinced me to sell my Melania meme coin.
Or hold.
That's what I meant. Hold. That's what I meant.
Because you got to remember, if you're selling it, someone else is buying it. It may be better to just go down with the ship.
Oren, it's always such a pleasure to talk to you. Fascinating stuff. Really enjoyed reading that article. Oren Cass, Chief Economist, American Compass. And just thanks again for joining us and having the conversation.
Well, thank you for wanting to.
What are they talking about in this even?
He said you passed his class.
People are literally writing articles like, Jon Stewart is what's wrong with the American electorate. And I'm like, I think that's hyperbolic.
I love that headline. It's like, I don't really know what I'm getting into with this article. Could be a few things.
It was bad, man. I was just like, whoa. Was there anything that he said that struck you as...
and not condescending.
And not condescending. And I have to say, I don't know what shit I've stepped in this week. Because after talking to Richard Taylor, who was the economist from last week, I was very pleased with the conversation. I thought, well, that was really interesting and spirited and said some things back and forth. But I had no idea how mad the economists, and they were fucking mad.
They were mad. I will say, though, I was looking at a lot of the response, and they weren't really from economists. They're just people that ride for economists for whatever reason.
Wait a minute. There's a Bayhive for economists?
Yeah, apparently there's people really...
There were plenty of economists that responded to it.
Eager to just jump in for their defense. The summary just seemed to be not all economists as well.
But also, the summary seemed to
be... First of all...
Economists?
Yeah, apparently there's people really eager to just jump in for their defense. The summary just seemed to be not all economists as well.
But also...
What are, like... I can't believe people are writing for economists, bro. Not that other whole evil profit, like, just justifying corporate profits, justifying evil capitalism. Bro. It's like we're just starting, like, from that assumption that, like, economists are, like, evil. And then it's like, if anyone who's not an economist tries to defend them, like, oh, I can't believe you're writing for them.
Seem to be like, well, you're just fucking stupid.
like maybe we just care about you being dishonest and not seriously engaging with the work of honest, hardworking hardworking academics who like have meaningfully improved the world, and then continuing to be dishonest about the entire field, so much so that you bring on someone that you would have never brought on under, or I shouldn't say you would have never brought on, you would have never like given this soft of treatment to, if it weren't for him sharing the same views on you with regard to the field of economics. I don't know, maybe we're upset about that.
And I was like, what? I don't know if that's really a cogent critique of this guy.
Yeah, is that constructive criticism? Not really.
A lot of it was just shock. Like, how can this guy have been on television for 30 years and not understand anything? And I'm like, I mean, I did. Richard Taylor, he's a Nobel Prize winning economist. He could have very easily said, like, I think you're completely misunderstanding, or like, he's a big boy. He could have handled it.
He said multiple times that he was polite. he was polite about it. But the reason they had back and forth was because he was trying to explain to Jon Stewart why economists support carbon taxes.
He said you passed his class.
People are literally writing articles like, Jon Stewart is what's wrong with the American electorate. And I'm like, I think that's hyperbolic.
I love that headline. It's like, I don't really know what I'm getting into with this article. Could be a few things.
It was bad. I was just like, what I would consider as kind of a more leftist view of what the economy is.
Something that kind of stood out to me is that in this conversation, he was talking about how the left and right agree on the diagnosis. And in his article, he refers to Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance as people who have talked out against financialization. But I thought it was interesting because he cites Marco Rubio in 2019 and J.D. Vance in 2023. And I haven't seen these people talking out against financialization recently, where the president of the United States is benefiting so much from this grift.
I'm against financialization, except for the Trump Eagle coin. The Trump Eagle coin. Get it today.
Yeah, I mean, Oren, he calls himself a pragmatist, but I think it's very optimistic that he always thinks the Republican Party is like right on the precipice of doing this.
I do think he's optimistic in that term.
Why did a job offer any of this pushback?
You know, this has been, you know, since the Keynesians kind of moved out of a position of authority and kind of the Reagan Revolution.
What?
The deregulation movement. I think.
Okay. Kind of. I think you are missing a part where we're a little bit past Reagan, and especially after 2008, there have been more Keynesians in important positions.
It's probably difficult for those on the left.
I mean, new, like obviously no one is like strictly like a Keynesian anymore. They're new Keynesian. I don't think there's any like post-Keynesians in any office or like policy place really in the U.S. Like big, like meaningful one, like, you know, that actually affects policy to a substantial degree.
To hear it and not say like, that's what we've been fucking.
Oh wait, you know what though? Fucking like Stephanie Kelton was on like Bernie's staff. Like she's an MMTer. She's not really like a post Keynesian, I guess, but like, you know, she certainly agrees with the post Keynesians on a lot. She's very progressive on economic issues.
Saying for 50 years. Like, what?
But you're both right that the deregulation was a bipartisan project that got us into this mess. So.
Yeah. That's always the deregulation is like, well, Clinton, shut up. Don't you dare talk about those things.
But besides that, and Carter.
Maybe we should just only do economics conversation. Maybe next week we should have like a round table, like come at me, bro. And we should just get all the
all your favorites
economists around.
Do we get to invite Furman back?
Please. He's so much of a pussy. He won't do it. He won't do it. Put Jason Furman back on. Put Brian Albright in there. Okay.
Yes.
I think Larry Summers might be busy though.
Yeah,
so.
it's not like, how did that happen? Like the meanest conversation. Like,
probably not Larry Summers.
Economists, they're literally like this group of bullies. They just sit in the thing and just like every time you ask them a question, it's like, what if you want?
Because you're lying and you're dishonest and you're like ignorant and refusing to I don't even want to say correct it. He's like not even like open to changing his mind typically. You made that clear by inviting Oren Cass on.
Understood anything.
It's revenge of the nerds.
I wish it was because they have so much power and control within the whole fucking thing. But maybe next week or no, next week we're not. Are we doing anything?
We're on vacation.
Yeah.
What? President's Day. We'll jump in with something more accessible, more culturally. We'll go engagement farming. We'll go engagement farming on the next
That's a no on the economics roundtable.
That's going to be a no on the economics roundtable. Brittany, what do the kids want to know this week?
Crazy.
All right, first up, John, can you please explain what Jeff Bezos is doing with the Washington Post?
He's look maxing it. He's mogging it.
President's Men.
Right.
I'm weird.
Movie. That's 3 Days of the Condor. Electric Horseman. The Sting.
Where yeah.
There is a nostalgia. I mean, Bezos can do a lot of things and the brand will continue. People have that recognition of the brand. So, and there has been.
I think the whole to the public and sending, what the fuck else are you doing with the money that you have other than like, what better use could there be?
There's a Melania documentary in cinemas. I've heard.
Like, maybe it's a weird symbiote. Like,
I think it's sterile.
I think they're done with the bullshit.
The president who threatens to put people in jail for saying the wrong thing. Like, how the fuck are you suggesting that that's supporting? I had no idea what a competitive sport veganism was. Have you guys?
Oh no! Oh no! He's coming after the vegans too. Fuck! It's over for me. You want to sleep good night? I appreciate you stopping by, Gavin.
Me too. And it's so interesting to me that
Don't worry, I'm gonna answer him after we finish here in a second.
When we got ourselves a little rescue farm, and we had no idea the world we were stepping into. And it's so interesting to me that the vegan world, they describe, I'm vegan, and you're like, no, you're a human that has a certain diet. But it is. I had no idea what a competitive sport veganism was. Have you guys ever done it? Have you ever gone and tried to do it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Fucking hard.
It is really hard. Especially if you don't cook. You have to cook if you're vegan.
No question. And it's also really hard to do it. Like they always say, like, oh, you just have more salads and stuff. The truth is you have more potato chips. Like,
I was just about to say the thing that I became aware of is that there's junk food for vegans. Like there's a place called Slutty Vegan. They yell at you when you walk in and say, hey, slut. Like there's definitely junk for everything.
Wait, that's how they greet you when you walk in?
I was stunned, but I remembered where I was.
They're still in business. That's interesting.
Right. I would think they'd at least go, hey, vegan. No, they go with...
It's 50-50, yeah.
It's this world where, like, it's the most unwelcoming world I think I've ever been a part of. It's incredibly competitive, and they're constantly stress testing whether you're living up to the right type. It's like the first thing, if you say like I'm vegan, the first thing vegans will always say to you is like, how long have you been vegan? And you'd be like, I guess like it's been like 2 years. And I'm like, yeah, 15 years. I've been doing it 15 years. And then somebody else will be like, well, I knew when I was 8 that it was wrong. And then so like you'd be talking again.
Just like me for real.
And I'm like, not completely. I mean, like I have other shit. And I'm like, the damage that does to peace. And at a certain point, somebody once told me, they go, you really want to fuck them up? Just tell them mushrooms are more sentient than shellfish, because that's true. And just watch them implode.
Okay, well, you're actually really harming my relationship.
Oh. There are obviously some vegans who do that, but that's not my experience. I don't understand why people expect dissonant figures like Fuentes and Hassan to vote for their party's establishment figures. You shouldn't expect dissonant what do you mean people expect? I don't think most people expect them to. That's kind of the issue. That's why they have an issue with them, right? I have an issue with Hassan because I don't expect him to vote for or endorse the establishment figure, right? That's why there's disagreement there. I have an issue when you won't vote for the person with the highest expected value of doing so.
Mushrooms right now.
But just to be clear, is that a no to lunch?
I'll see them there. I'll see them. You know what? Tell them I'll meet them at the Slutty Vegan.
Okay.
All right. How else can they get a hold of us there?
Twitter, we are Weekly Show Pod. Instagram, Threads, TikTok, Blue Sky, we are Weekly Show Podcast. And you can like, subscribe, and comment on our YouTube channel, The Weekly Show with Jon Stewart.
Boom! We got next week off. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy your week off. Thanks again for your wonderful help in putting these episodes.
What are chances the woman here will debate me? Okay. Can we get non-fun versus random Jon Stewart woman producer? Jesus Christ. What a fucking... I don't even know I don't know what to call it. It's just... I think it's just totally dishonest. Yeah. That's... I think that's... I think that's the best way to put it. Just... willingly dishonest. It's just idiotic for a socialist to unironically vote blue no matter who. Why? Plenty of socialists do vote blue. Like 90% of socialists do vote blue no matter who. What do you mean? It's like... I think you should vote for the person that like just does the most good things, and I obviously have a position on who that is, and I expect people who share similar values to me to be able to reach a similar conclusion about who is most aligned with them and who would do the most good things. Okay. You'll head over to Food Shops on YouTube. I bet she's about to end stream as well, but I'll try to stream tomorrow. I don't know for sure if I will, but I'll try to stream tomorrow. And if I don't, the day after, I'll be at the UFA event. So yeah, love streaming, love to guys watching stream. Helps me do cool things like be able to go to the UFA event and hang out with other cool streamers and do a fun IRL stream there. Go check out the podcast if you have not. Hold on, let me get the link to it. Faith
and these people were
okay, that's a link. Go watch if you have not. Like and subscribe. Trying to grow that channel in a more formal, less kind of heated or less confrontational, less online Discord feeling, less Amaral Gibbs and Wick vibes and more traditional podcast vibes. So hopefully, we can get Oren Cass on the non-fun podcast one day. Okay, that's the goal. That's how I'll know I made it, when we get Oren Cass on. All right. Yeah, love to guys watch the stream. Go check out the podcast. Love you guys. See you, if not tomorrow, then the day after at the UFA event. Like, subscribe.